global change. And our topic tonight has a lot to do with this global change, global reset, with the one world financial institutions. And on Saturday, Sheila's going to be talking to G. Edward. We're going to be interviewing with Sheila G. Edward Griffin. He wrote a book, and I threw the book on your desk, about the UN, Fearful Master. That book explains the UN's stated goals from its charter and foundation, and it gets into one of the aspects is their political, religious, and their economic.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that book, The Fearful Master by G. Edward Griffin. It should be a good interview on Saturday with him.
Yeah, you got to read the quotes in there. You go through that book, and once it gets into the one world financial system, it talks about the purposes for the IMF and how the United States Treasury Secretary had to resign because he, after the Emergency Banking Act or Bankruptcy Act of '33, the Treasury Secretary doesn't get paid by the United States government. His salary comes instead and has come from the IMF. So he is an agent of the IMF, showing how we're already intertwined in an international economy. And what we see here and what we're living through is the merger or consolidation, final consolidation of this one world economic order on the heels of the religious and political order as well.
Well, exactly, and that's why we have two very, very special guests, important people on tonight. One is V, the Guerrilla Economist, his website, roguemoney.net. Also with V, the Guerrilla Economist, is Michael Rosecliffe. Very tremendous, very intellectual, very, very smart man. And they're both on the Newsmaker line with us, and we'd like to welcome first, V, welcome to the Hagmann Hagmann Report this evening. I apologize for not, did we just get connected? Okay, here we go, there we go. All right, I'd like to welcome V. We got disconnected briefly. Welcome, V, to the Hagmann Hagmann Report tonight, sir. It's great to have you.
Doug, it's great to be on. It's been such a long time. So many things have happened, and I guess tonight, I think people are going to be in for a treat. We got the 1-2 punch. The boys from NYC are going to be running rampant on Hagmann and Hagmann tonight.
Oh boy, should I get my football helmet on or my bicycle helmet?
I think you should. We got me. You got Michael Rosecliffe from ArcLight Institute, the guy who's with the Looking Glass program. Former algo trader himself, and so it's going to be exciting. I mean, tonight is going to be a very monumental time. We're going to cover a lot of economic ground. There's so many things to cover. Suffice it to say, it is. I mean, we've already moved right now, I'd say, into the danger zone. I've been so incredibly busy the last couple of months, many sleepless nights, getting very little sleep these days because of all the things that are happening, Doug. And I want the listeners to understand this. This is not. What's happening now, folks, this is not some metrics and math that, we're looking at U.S. stuff and trying to and get clear information. We're looking at global numbers. We're looking at U.S. numbers, but the U.S. numbers are all frauds. They're all lies. So what we wind up doing is we wind up re-engineering everything that we get out of the U.S. to make it fit the correct paradigm of exactly where we are. We've all seen the massive beatdown in metals for the last 2 weeks. A lot of people are panicking. They're like, oh, my God, what do I do? It's the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. One thing that the Guerrilla will tell you, as well as Rosecliffe will tell you, is that you need to stay the course. You need to keep the big picture in play. There's some rumors that Mike has discovered, data that he ran with Looking Glass, with rumors that I've kind of confirmed, and we're kind of watching it. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on, especially with the Dow. Mike last week and myself, we both kind of came to the consensus that it's going to be the end of we've seen the bottom on metals, and look at where metals gone. I mean, it's the biggest. I think Mike even mentioned it. It's the biggest gain on silver in over a year. It's the biggest jump ever, folks. There was 1 point in the last 3 days, 3 to 4 days. There was about 1.5 million ounces of silver was purchased in 3 days. Okay. 3 days. The buying of gold and silver has gone through the roof. Desperate times, desperate measures. We are in the last throes, the final phase of this whole entire thing. And with that being said, I guess I'll let Mike introduce himself. Mike, you there?
He's on. Mr. Rosecliffe, go ahead, sir. Let me just triple check here.
Hey guys, sorry about that. I'm
here.
Had the microphone muted for a second there.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yep. That's the joys of running Skype on a Linux interface. But it's great to be on. I will say that I've listened to you guys before, and it's fantastic to be on. And to be on with V, I think we're going to have some fun tonight.
Well, just give me a second to get my bicycle helmet on, and Joe's got a toddler one, but it just fits on top of his head. Sir, tell us a little bit about yourself, any websites, books, whatever, and then let's get into the meat of the matter. So go ahead.
Sure. I will start off with some gratuitous self-promotion. Cool. I can work with that. Now, it's thearclightinstitute.com if people want to learn more about Looking Glass, what the software is, what it does, and not how it's built. That's the one thing I don't tell folks is the analogy I use. I said when Tesla discovered DC electricity, I promise you he didn't start running off copies of the of how he made what he made. But thearclightinstitute.com, we have the emergency action message newsletter there. $150 a month for a 12-month subscription, and people go, "You're out of your mind, $150 a month." I go, "Well, there's $150 a month is a bargain when you consider it's been Looking Glass. The software has been a labor of over a decade that started right after 9/11, and with a very inspiring quote by a guy by the name of Stephen Hawking. That said, at some point in time in the not-too-distant future, and that was some years ago, all the machines together would equate to something of a human brain. And, of course, as people so often hear me say, I said, that's the kind of stuff that'll make you stand in the kitchen and eat a box of Oreos at midnight staring at the clock and kind of just, daydreaming and wondering. And that's really kind of how Looking Glass and its forward-looking ability, which is now 96% accurate in forecasting economic, geopolitical, military, various global events. That's kind of how it got started, and so many thousands of hours later, I'm sure in programming, I've arrived at 96% accuracy. So I do offer that information, the super detailed level. I offer that in the EAM, which V has seen. And I think I speak from when he said he was pretty impressed by it. Anybody that's seen it's been really kind of impressed by it. But it's thearclightinstitute.com. Feel free to visit. Feel free to contact. Love when people email and offer new ideas or search ideas and stuff. So that's the short story behind Looking Glass. But it's a lot of people ask me the question. They say, is it similar to the Half Past Human project? Cliff High, and just to have my name mentioned in the same sentence as him is, he was one of the sources of inspiration for what I did. But to even have my name mentioned in the same sentence as him is very flattering. But it's a little bit past the webbot, shall we say, in terms of design and such. So I'm just really excited now. I wrestled with the idea as to whether or not I even wanted to go public with it. So this is last couple days, couple weeks. I've been starting to do the talk radio rounds and everything, and I'm glad I did.
Interesting. Well, good. V, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Just take us where we need to go here, especially in this minefield of I'm waiting for silver to get down to $2 before I buy. How's that? Never mind.
I'm glad you brought that up because what's happening is this. Back in May, I came on and I think we kind of talked, we corroborated, we gave the silver codes back in May, and we said that the silver price fix is going to be closing. They're going to be moving to an electronic price fix, and they're going to move it to the Chicago CME. And sure enough, we hit that nail on the head, pinpoint precision. It was awesome. So just like that. When the silver price fix was moved to the CME, the codes were given because of the massive volatility that's going to be occurring in the metals market. And what I mean by massive volatility, folks, is this. There's so much volatility that's going to occur between now and then until the wheels really start coming off this thing. They're making ridiculous amounts of profits on the churning of silver up and down on these paper electronic exchanges. The real physical stuff is dwindling at a massive rate. To be quite honest with you, it costs mining companies about $24.20 per ounce to unearth silver. So there's no reasonable reason why silver is $17.20 per ounce today.
And V, if I can for a second, I went to a couple coin shops around here, and you couldn't buy, when it was at its lowest the other day, you couldn't buy silver for less than $25, $26 an ounce spot price.
Yep.
And it was the same thing at 20 spot price. So
absolutely.
That shows you right there,
people, Absolutely, man. And that's what people don't understand about premiums. Okay, premium prices jump when things get harder and harder to get, and so some days, some weeks, the premiums are much higher than others, and it has to do with if the metals are acquirable in any sort of quantity at that time. So it's very important that people keep track of that. But with the churning of silver that's been going on now, especially this recent beatdown. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys how this whole thing kind of plays into it over here. The recent price beatdown, what we've seen is this. Okay. They are losing, and like you said before, like I said, there's no reason why it's trading so far below cost value. Same thing with gold as well. So the charade of the Chicago CME is kind of falling apart, and the reason for that is this: I don't think most people understand how a commodity exchange works. Commodity exchanges traditionally, you'd have a producer, you have a consumer. They would come together, so to speak, and they would have a price discovery to find out exactly what the market price of this particular commodity is. So there's a bit of footwork, a bit of groundwork, a bit of labor involved in that process, and that's how the price of a particular commodity is priced. Okay, there's a significant problem when less than 2% of the entire CME actually does price discovery. And then the 98% of the CME is involved in this upside-down pyramid called high-frequency trading, where you have such a minuscule amount of actual physical inventory, and at this point the CME probably has none or next to none left, and they have massive amounts of paper built up on top of that to cover so little silver. So this is occurring, and you have these HFT computers that are pumping up artificial volume. Because here's the thing. When you have the type of economic environment that we have today, folks, you don't have performance. Because of lacking of performance, how do you make it up? You got to pump it up. We're talking about volume here, and that's what we're seeing. Massive amounts of volume. Dow's up 17,000 points. Why? I mean, why is that up there 17,000, some odd points? And then on last Friday, if you've gotten the news, I've covered this on my show as well. Last Friday there was the market dropped 200 points, and people are like, "Oh, look, there's a global slowdown." Folks, this is the time of mass confusion, and I can't emphasize the amount of deception that's at play right now, the amount of programming that's at play right now. When you hear the word, "Hey, there's a global slowdown," okay, what are you thinking? You're thinking the entire global economies are all crashing, they're all imploding. That is not the case. Okay, the global slowdown, and I'm going to hand this over to Mike because he'll fill in the blanks on this one. The global slowdown is this. You look at the BDI, the Baltic Dry Index, which is a pulse of global trade. Okay, that's been down. I mean, it's crashing to 2008 levels. Okay, you look at the Brent crude and the West Texas Intermediate pricing of oil. They used to converge very closely. Now they're splitting, and that split's happening greater and greater. Then you take into account you have the Brent, you have the WTI, you have BDI. You look at that, and then you look at a ridiculously high U.S. dollar index. Something's not making sense here. Okay, the biggest trade indicators are all down, but the U.S. dollar index is up. Folks, what you're seeing right now is the trade indications are down because those trade indicators are priced in dollars. So there's less dollars being used for trade. And this is why I said, last April, I said, I received my HSBC report, and my HSBC currencies report has stated that the number 2 used currency for trade last year of 2013 was the Chinese yuan, supplanted the euro. And not in European trades, but in Asian trades and Eurasian trades. Why is that important? Well, Eurasia, the Eurasian trade zone, which we'll get into later tonight, that's where the bread and butter of the global economy is. That's where over 70% of the global GDP, 80% of global manufacturing, 60% of global trade, it's right there. So this is a tantamount thing. And then, later on tonight, we're gonna go into ISIS. We're going to tell you what this whole nonsense in the Middle East is about. Folks, what you're witnessing the world over, Ukraine, ISIS, Syria, North Africa, the Ebola zones, all this crap that is like hitting the rotational oscillator at the same time. All it is, folks, is this. It's gold coming back as a settlement for trade. You are witnessing the birth of gold in trade and the death of the petrodollar. Mike.
That's, I mean, V and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about just exactly what a lot of what V just went over meant. And one of the things that popped up on Looking Glass's radar over and over and over and over again was the petrodollar, indicating the fact that literally one of the only things holding the United States dollar or the U.S. dollar as a world reserve currency is the fact that it is still used to transact in barrels of oil or tens of thousands of barrels of oil. If you want to go out on the open market and purchase any sort of petroleum product, there's still that requisite conversion, to convert whatever your local currency or regional global currency or national currency, into, you have to convert it back into that petrodollar. There's my favorite world leader at the moment, and I always preface this by saying, I don't want to sound anti-American by saying this, but if the guy ran for president in the States, he'd win in a landslide. Mr. Putin sits back and smirks and smiles every time the EU and every time the U.S. threatens sanctions against Russia. Sanctions against Russia. All that man has to do is push something that I have personally dubbed the F the petrodollar button, and that's it. That's your devaluation of the dollar in a nutshell. And to speak to exactly what V just said, we are witnessing the return of a metals-based economy. If nothing else, the fact that the fiat currency-based economy that we've seen for the last number of decades, ostensibly, is becoming unmanageable. It's becoming unrealistic, and there has to be a return to something that resembles sanity. Ipso facto, I'll give you an example. I was on a guy by the name of Dale Pinkert, fantastic guy, by the way. He's a Forex trader, worked on the CME for a while. And one of the things I shared with his trading room was I said, is it me or is it just Looking Glass? Or is anybody else noticing the fact that despite all the smoke and mirrors and the charades and all the happy dances going on, that global currencies are slowly but surely starting to move closer and closer to parity? Each has its moments. Each has its, there's a run in the dollar. Oh, there's a run in the New Zealand dollar. Oh, there's a run in yuan. But the point of the story is that everything seems to be coming closer and closer and closer to parity. And the reason that is during a global currency reset, albeit a very planned one, I think by now that's glaringly obvious, during a global currency reset, that is going to make the accounting associated with remarking things to market, which is mark to market, are three words that can make any banker almost lose their lunch. Number one. Number two, I said, by moving those currencies closer to value, when the music stops and everybody finds a seat, or people, certain individuals find a seat, the reality of the situation is going to be it's a lot easier, and I'll use myself and V here. If the Bank of V or the Intergalactic Republic of V, their dollar's worth $1 to my Republic of Rosecliff, my $2, than it is if it's a $1 to $5 spread. So it's going to be a lot easier to have various nations agree on consolidated, presumably metals-backed currencies, and that's something that's been just all over Looking Glass. I mean, it's a statistical inevitability. I mean, when it gets past a certain point, and I search for the same thing, 5 or 6 or 7 different ways using various keyword metrics, and V and a few others at this point can attest to the what I have lovingly called freakish accuracy of this program. That's what we're seeing. I think we're starting to see all the puzzle pieces start to get put together slowly but surely. And again, to speak to stuff that V has said for a long time, it's, people say, well, I want to go out and purchase silver. It's $22 an ounce. Should I wait? It'll be $21 an ounce tomorrow. And I say, who cares? The object of the game is to be holding it after the implosion. That's the object, and of course to fight the temptation to want to sell it for paper during the run-up, because that speaks to hyperinflation. People often ask, well, where's all the hyperinflation we keep hearing about? And that that's a question until you realize that most of the dollars and most of the dollar-denominated securities that have been printed have been exported overseas. So as the dollar becomes less desirable and the dollar starts to come flooding back on shore, you're going to have a run-up in the market. You're going to have a run-up in consumer confidence. It's going to be temporary. You're going to have a run-up in various equities and debt securities markets. And of course, you're going to see, even during that, you're going to start to see, as it all comes, starts to reach a crescendo, you're going to see the price of metal start to rise dramatically. And there's going to be that temptation to want to sell the metal for paper and go, hey, look at the big profit that I make. And it's no. The metal that you're buying is not a trade. Stocks are a trade. Options are a trade. Forex is a trade. Metals are a savings, and metals are an investment. And the object of the game is to have them after the paper is completely worthless. And that's going to be during that run up. That's going to be one of the last buying opportunities the powers that be have, as people start to sell off their metals by design. To go, hey, look what I can do. I can go out and buy a new car, whatever the case may be. Don't do that. That's going to be their last buying opportunity to make sure they're holding as much of it as they possibly can. When the paper goes from, being worth, it's questionable, to absolutely being agreed upon that it's worth zero.
Interesting. Okay, if I can jump in here with a question, because I was listening to some economic news over the weekend. Of course, the jobs report came out. It was really a terrible jobs report. 55 to 69-year-olds, 230,000 job addition. 16 to 19-year-olds, 45,000 job additions, essentially. But the powers are applauding this, for crying out loud, when in fact this is the weakest job report to me that I've seen, because you're dealing with people, and nothing against Walmart greeters, but you're talking about really Walmart greeters and fast food employees on both sides of the age spectrum. But yet, we've got such a strong dollar, everyone says. This is really a spin of reality and perception.
With the jobs market, too, don't forget, so many companies now are putting their employees down to 29 hours a week to avoid the cost of implementing Obamacare and paying health care for their employers or for their employees. And I know corrections officers and other people who have been affected by this as well. So not only is the jobs market terrible, but the places who are working and hiring full-time employees are now knocking them down to under 30 hours, so they don't have to carry that price burden of Obamacare.
Yeah, and V, this is all part of this manipulation of numbers. Everything is a fraud, right? I mean, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been saying since 2008, when this whole thing went bust, and when I first debuted on your show on January the 11th, 2013, I was saying that the economy has been contracting at an annual rate of anywhere between 3.8 to 4%. And for the government last month or two, finally come out and say, yeah, you know what, we had an economic contraction of about 3%. They're actually coming closer to admitting the truth, okay? You take that into account. You take this phony jobs, this pathetic jobs creation thing. Folks, most of it's all part-time workers. It's low-income wage. There's no real jobs out there, okay? It's incredibly bad. When you have a job market where 10.6 million people currently are receiving unemployment benefits, when you have a jobs market where you have 92 million Americans permanently out of the workforce. Okay, we have more than 50% of Americans right now, more than 50% of Americans are receiving some sort of government benefits, whether it's food stamps, whether it's some sort of welfare, whatever have you. Okay, 50%, 50. It's unbelievable. The U.S. right now, folks, is one of the top 10 unhealthiest countries. Let me just put it this way. You look at all the stress that people have. You look at the fact that you have this massive unhealthiness of people. You have all this massive amounts of debt. The depression rates going through the roof. The medication rates are going through the roof. You look at the 10 wealthiest zip codes in the United States. This will be shocking to most people. I went ahead and I looked up what are the 10 wealthiest zip codes in the United States. And it turns out that every single one of them in Washington, D.C. and in Washington, D.C. suburbs. In other words, it's in a part of the country that makes nothing, produces nothing, and takes everything. It's unbelievable. Wow. Okay? So we have a serious problem here when, the GDP numbers are fudged. Okay? And that's the thing here, folks. We're not dealing with real numbers when the American economic numbers, over 50% of the GDP numbers in the U.S., over 50%, 50, are nothing but reshuffled debt. They're reshuffling debt into the GDP numbers, and they're completely fudging the numbers. So people are thinking, we're having economic growth. Oh, look, jobs market has been added. Nothing's been added. We're in free fall. Folks, this should scare the crap out of you. Look, I know there's Shinola running around out there rampant, and I know all these other things that are out there to distract you. But here's the thing. Here's something tangible you can look at square in the eye. Here's a number for you, okay? Since 2008 till now, there has been zero economic recovery. Since 2008 till now, there has been a contracting economic collapse. We are in a free fall, okay? We haven't hit the absolute, terminal velocity of this thing, but we are already descending on a glide path, and we're about to have our wings broken off and go into a straight down trajectory, okay? That day is coming, because why? As I'm speaking to you folks, the days of the dollar being used in trade are done. How many times I got to come on board and highlight the fact you got over 100 some odd nations that have said, you know what, the heck with the dollar, we don't want to use it anymore. How many times? I mean, how many times does it have to be detailed that the largest economies in the world have already entered into trade agreements circumventing the U.S. dollar? Look at the Eurasian trade zone. Look at this massive trade zone that has emerged. Okay, and you got to look at the Middle East and you got to look at Africa. Why are those things? And I'll get into that later in the show of why they're important, because that has to do with trying to control Eurasia, and the U.S. is losing terribly on it. And you're seeing this beat down on oil prices, which the Americans have done this before back in the late 80s to collapse the Soviet economy. They're doing it again, but this time around, folks, the Russians see it coming from a mile away. Okay. On top of that, they just found another huge oil deposit in the North Arctic Sea that the Russians have discovered, and you take into fact that this Eurasian trade zone is not just Eurasia. It's also Japan is involved, Taiwan is involved, South Korea is involved, North Korea. I just heard that Kim Jong-un is nowhere to be seen. He's MIA. He's missing in action. We don't know if he's dropped dead from eating too much ice cream or whatnot. But the kid is nowhere to be found. So so I knew about, and this is also pretty interesting because I knew about rumors, almost a year ago about a Russian and Chinese operation to take him down. I actually wrote an article about it months ago stating that. So it seems to be heading that direction. So all these things are happening, folks, and right now it's the most dangerous time because you have this Ebola scare, and it is a scare, and they are testing the responses. They're testing defenses. They're seeing who stands up, who says what, which are the strong nails that kind of stand up that they got to hammer down when they do release the big one. So all this stuff is happening, folks. It's time that either you got to have an exit strategy, you got to have some sort of strategy in order to survive onto the other side. Mike, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, once again, you even look at the Eurasian trade zone and that's, like I said, something that just continually pops up on the radar of Looking Glass, so to speak. And that's to say, I don't even think people realize, economically speaking, and I guess you guys are going to have to deal with my ADD style a little bit, but first of all, the Eurasian trade zone, all Germany has to decide to do over there is jump ship and go to the BRICS nations. That's all that has to happen. And that Eurasian trade, or that Eurozone, I should say, not Eurasian, that Eurozone is going to descend. The Euro as a currency and the EU as it stands right now will just descend into absolute chaos. There's no question about that. And to point back to a metric that V had mentioned earlier, guys, I'll give you a wild guess. You want to take a wild guess at what Looking Glass is indicating the real unemployment rate is in the United States, and that's absent those delightful metrics of after a year you just fall off the radar, and apparently they just don't count you anymore. And that's also, let's say, counting partial underemployment, not even entire, the full level of unemployment. But if you guys, anybody want to take a guess?
Sure, I'll say 34.6%.
28-31.
34.6% is so freakishly close to the correct number. It's 35.1.
Okay.
Wow.
35.1. That is absolutely outlandishly, freakishly close. So the point of the story is the last time that those numbers were seen, adjusted for population, net and gross population of the United States, workforce, and that's not even counting undocumented workers, because, well, they're apparently just there's really not a lot of metrics on the web available in order to factor them in. But that is actually worse than we've seen or what would have been seen in 1928 and then into 1929, into the Great Depression. That's so basically, apparently, by the way the metrics are being counted now, economic growth and a guarded recovery and cautiously optimistic factors in, the fact that during this alleged recovery, we're seeing numbers that haven't been seen, spatial data, adjusted spatial data, that haven't been seen since the single greatest economic collapse in the recorded history of the United States. So, once again, I have said this many times on the air, and that is when you run the looking glass data and you compare it to what a mainstream media outlet purports to be going on, the discrepancies can be so huge sometimes. I said I actually watch the news now, or the mainstream news, as I've come to call them, for an entirely different reason than I used to. It's no longer for information. I watch it for morbid entertainment, and that's 35%, that's a real number. A 0% net-on-net growth economically in the United States, a 0% GDP growth in the United States, that's a real number. That's not just something that V is saying, to make a dramatic point. I've run the data on that before, and it's just, the only way I know how to phrase it is, find me a junior high school economics class, and then just ask them to do one thing. Point to one solid, legitimate, concrete metric that indicates that any of the major indexes, be them Forex, debt securities, equities, treasuries, or otherwise, make an intelligent argument as to what they're doing at the levels that they're doing at, and I guarantee you, unless they just start making stuff up the way the government seems to at times, unless they start making stuff up, it can't be done. There is not one single concrete economic indicator of health. And by the way, all those adjusted numbers, and V should love this, but all those lovely adjusted economic GDP and growth output numbers that they make for very nice graphics on CNBC and stuff. But little do people know that a lot of the metrics that they're seeing in terms of industrial output are actually factoring in Chinese-owned factory on Chinese-owned land in the United States, amongst other nations. So apparently, one of the number wizards decided that it would be a bright idea to, go ahead and say, should we designate the difference of, between foreign-owned industrial output on U.S. soil? We'll call it the same thing. The hell with it. Why not? So those are real metrics. I mean, like I said, it's in terms of what Looking Glass sees, looking forward. I think at this point in time we have, like I said, with the hyperinflation thing, there is an inevitable implosion, and the object of the game is to be smart. They say a wise man sees danger, and gets out of the way. As I like to say, don't be a target, be elsewhere. There is going to be essentially. You have to realize that, once again, the human factor is that you're going to burn the same generation twice. People's 401ks went to liquid caca in 2008. You're going to build them all the way back up again, and you're going to try that again? Ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen. And that's the kind of stuff that Looking Glass sees in terms of forward-looking. It's not a bright economic outlook short term.
V, your thoughts, obviously, your additions to that.
Yeah, Mike nailed it. And one of the biggest things that a lot of people have to realize is that we are seriously losing our position in the globe, so to speak. Okay, we used to be at the head of the table. We're no longer there. We're somehow on the floor, trying to scrape as much breadcrumbs off the ground as possible. A lot of the things that we're doing, and a lot of the rest of the world is starting to wake up to the fact is this, that being an ally with the United States is downright dangerous, and what I mean by that is this: when the U.S. decided to go into Ukraine, the place that I said that is the place where the dollar goes to die. When the U.S. decided to get in, put their foot into that operation, okay, that began the process of this whole entire accelerated decline. Because what's happening is they have most assuredly not only put Ukraine at great risk, and as we speak, the Ukrainian economy is completely collapsed, but they've put the Eurozone economy, at great risk as well. Now, the thing with the Eurozone that people need to be mindful of, What happened in the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months? Well, you had Eric Holder go ahead and fine the French bank BNP Paribas. Okay, BNP Paribas, France's largest bank, was fined $10 billion. And then, but BNP is like, wait a minute, why are you fining us $10 billion for getting involved in basically money laundering operations for and banking functions for quote unquote dangerous nations, right, rogue countries, so to speak. And they're saying, why are we being penalized when J.P. Morgan was helping us every single step of the way, and J.P. Morgan gets to walk away scot-free?
Well, wait a second. Didn't J.P. Morgan get fined $28 billion?
That was for something else, completely different.
All right.
And that was like a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Yep. So this was, this is completely different. So they're like, wait a minute, why do we get fined like this? And folks, BNP after taxes takes home about $7.3 billion per year. So $10 billion is that's over a year plus worth of net profit. So finally, the Justice Department said, okay, fine, we'll just reduce it down to 8.4. And the stipulation is you can't use dollars for an unspecified amount of time. So the French said, okay, fine, you don't want us to use dollars, we just won't. And as soon as they exited stage right, what happened? You had Total Petroleum, second largest oil company in Europe, come out saying, hey, we don't need the petrodollar. Why are we pricing oil in dollars? Why are we doing that? There's no need for it, okay? And what's happening now, so we're seeing a French revolt against the U.S. dollar. And the Germans, okay, who have anywhere between 4,700 to about 5,000 companies that currently do business with the Russians, okay, the Germans are like, wait a minute, we're not going to get behind any sort of a sanction. They'll mouth the sanction with their lips, but with their feet and their pens and the contracts that they're signing, no, they are not going to allow any sort of sanctions against the Russians. So the Germans said, we're not going to be a part of it. Now you're seeing a Franco-German rift away from the U.S., and even though they're, quote-unquote, doing airstrikes against, quote-unquote, ISIS, the fact of the matter is this, and this is from two top-level intel sources that I got. And when I confirmed with both of them, these are two individuals that don't know each other, and they corroborated the same story, folks. There is, in fact, contingents of German and French troops that are fighting us alongside pro-Russian separatists in the Ukraine. That's massive. That's massive. They are.
Okay, you better state that again, V, because are you saying that we're fighting side by side with the Russians?
No. The French and the Germans are fighting side by side with the pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine.
Okay.
Against the U.S. installed government there.
Gotcha. All right. Against
American interests, quote unquote. Okay. And on top of that, there is a rumor that I'm still waiting to substantiate here. There is that Blackwater or Exy or Academy, whatever they're calling themselves this week, mercenary groups were captured. Okay, they were captured. So can you imagine the ramifications when they release these guys with full press coverage? I mean, it's going to be incredible here. So again, we're seeing more and more of the corruption, and this is the whole thing here with Ukraine. We don't have a strategy. Our strategy is chaos. Our strategy is to bomb the hell out of every country we go to. Look at the nonsense with ISIS. Okay, ISIS is a CIA creation. Okay, it's Al Qaeda rebranded Al Qaeda 2.0. That's all it is. All right. And Mike will get into some of the logistical crap with ISIS that I find to be very amusing. But the thing with ISIS is this, okay? Here's the deal. When did ISIS unleash themselves upon the Middle Eastern continent? It happened to be around the same time when a Saudi Arabian princes were meeting with various Russian and Chinese officials doing backroom deals, because right now, folks, the Saudis want out of the petrodollar. They've been burned by the U.S. They don't want to be they're running out of oil, which I've detailed many times. They are running out of oil. Okay, the largest well, the Ghawar well, founded in 1948, sixth largest well in Saudi Arabia, pumps about 64% of their oil output. Today, it's pumping out 90%. It's pumping out 90% water and 10% oil. So they're running out of it. Okay, hence why Saudi Arabia was involved in an energy war against the Syrians. Okay, now Saudi Arabia has been meeting with secret deals between the Russians and the Chinese in order to get the heck out of the petrodollar, because they know this whole thing is coming apart, okay? Because already the Russians and the Chinese are already selling oil in non-dollar terms. They're already doing it. They're selling oil right now in rubles. They're selling it. They're settling it in yuan. It's already happening. China just sent one of their destroyers to the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, again, which is a big show, which is a big sign that, hey, you know what? We are a nation that's strong enough that we could take over where the U.S. left off. We can provide safety and security for the free flow of oil to the entire world. That's massive. So it's into this environment that all of a sudden ISIS gets unleashed, and now they're rampaging through the Middle East, taking over one town after the other, taking over one country after the other. Okay, it also corroborates within the same time frame about a few months ago when a Saudi prince was carjacked. Okay, by a special ops team. $300,000 in cash was taken and secret documents. What are those secret documents? Well, those secret documents are the meetings, the names, and the places and the individuals who were involved in the entire deconstruction of Saudi Arabia from the entire petrodollar scheme. Massive, massive news. Okay, so all of this is occurring. You have also this Ebola outbreak in Western Africa. And what does Obama do? Well, what does he do? He sends 3,000 troops, and yesterday he said he's announcing he's sending more troops to go fight Ebola. Folks, look, I'm very familiar with the region. I've worked there. Here's the deal. That whole region, okay, when you take those nations to put it together, that's bigger than Texas or Alaska. How the heck are you going to take 3,000, 6,000 troops and secure any kind of border? You can't. This has nothing to do with fighting Ebola. Ebola is just a cover. The real aspect of why they're going into there, number one, is because of the oil and gas that's there. Number two, the Chinese have already approached the Liberians, the Sierra Leones, and the Nigerians, the Kenyans. China has an effective African strategy. The U.S. has a non-existent African strategy, except the only strategy we know, war. If we can't get it, just blast them. And so all of a sudden you got this disease cover, and all of a sudden we're moving troops there. Why are we moving troops there? Folks, there are right now conflicts occurring between Chinese troops and American troops in Djibouti. That is what I've heard. That's been confirmed by 3 different sources. There's actually casualties that have occurred on both sides. There's proxy wars that are going on all over the place. And why are these proxy wars occurring? Because a system that you've relied upon for 40 years, the petrodollar, is coming apart. It's about to end. It's over. Okay? And then you look at, and Mike will go into the whole Aussie dollar and New Zealand dollar. That's all, breaking of the system. Look at what they're doing. I'll take it a little bit more national here. Look what they're doing in California. California is completely dry. We all know the electromagnetic resonance residue that's been left over. We know about the HARP attacks there. I mean, it's completely drying out. So the question is, I asked one of my intel guys, hey, what's up with California? They're like, well, V, when you look at it, it's California, you got New York, you got Texas. Those are the 3 states they're trying to break. These are the support states. Cali goes down, Texas goes down, New York goes down. Those are the main states you want to break to crack the economy of the United States. And that's exactly what they're doing. So this is the most dangerous economic time I could ever did see in all my years of reading economic history, studying it, the whole 9 yards. Mike?
Yeah, there again, it's just, wow. It's it's always a treat to be on with somebody that speaks as quickly as I do. But one thing that I will say is that to speak to the ISIS thing, first of all, and I know V loves this, and I always love getting a laugh out of him. So here goes. I said, statistically, and the first time I saw ISIS, I said, okay, and this is you don't need a looking glass to figure this out on your own. I said, okay, so let me get this straight. Super terror group pops up out of nowhere who apparently has access to some fantastic video editors and some fantastic Photoshop people and a local Toyota Tundra dealership, which apparently produces Toyota Tundras with the SR5 upfit package that you can actually only buy in Texas, and they're outfitted identical to the way the Border Patrol vehicles, at least we know where they went, those vehicles are supposed to be outfitted, and every once in a while there's an F-150 mixed in with them too, which is always kind of comical, and I often wonder to myself if they at least got the warranty package on a volume purchase. But there again, it's pretty obvious that, if you look at the intel community, I think at this point in time, statistically, and once again, I look at things arbitrarily and by the numbers, so there's this super terror group out there called ISIS, and no one's ever heard of them before, and in 6 months they've managed to take over half the Middle East, apparently. So that means the intel community is has either just gone full retard, or they're not telling us something. So we know they're not retarded, so they're obviously not telling us something. And I've run statistical data, and it's just, I mean, it fits right in when you start to take a step back. And I often use the examples, if you've ever seen a jigsaw puzzle, with the little pictures on the pieces. Now, you can enjoy each individual tiny little piece and the picture on it, or you can start to put the puzzle together. And then, all of a sudden, you start to see the next level of the plan that's at hand. And I said, the ISIS thing, to me, is about as, it's pretty much the same deal as the Ebola thing that's going on. And that is to say that each one of those incidents, statistically forward-looking, and this is just the result that I've gotten over and over again, it's the beginning of conditioning to the public. Notice, if you will, with all of a sudden, right in the wake of the ISIS scare, of course, now we got journalists getting their heads allegedly lopped off, and notice I say allegedly. And, of course, it so comes out in the mainstream media that, the guy that did the beheading has a British accent. That means he's an armchair jihadist that quit his day job and went to go fight alongside troops in the middle of the friggin' desert. Okay. That is a play to begin to restrict the travel of first world nations, because they're already figuring out that people are figuring out it's time to start looking for the exit doors, which is where a whole other subject that I'm sure we'll get into later comes up, which is the expatriation of individuals and wealth. But that's just another excuse, because you know what's going to happen. It's going to say, well, we can't target just Muslims, so we have to put travel restrictions on everyone. And that's going to be followed by, Ebola, of course. You know, West African, Middle African nations, and I'm sure the Middle East will pop up again as Ebola hotspots, and that's going to be another round of travel restrictions. Nothing too dramatic, just enough so that people get used to, you know, hearing, oh, there might be travel restrictions, put in place, so the doors can start to be closed a little bit here and there. Now, all right, let's put ourselves in the mindset of somebody that might be truly diabolical, okay? So, you know, people say, well, the government released Ebola. First of all, V and his background in science and medicine, which I never even knew he had, you know, will tell you that Ebola by itself really does not make a very good weaponized pathogen, because it's very good at doing one thing, killing the crap out of people so quickly it doesn't have a chance to spread very far. It's not like an airborne disease, okay? You have to realize, why would they want to put travel restrictions in place before the release of a so-called global population reducing pathogen? The fact of the matter is, they wouldn't. If you were a bioterrorist, hypothetically speaking, you would want as much travel to happen as humanly possible, because that's how you get contagion spread. You want it to go everywhere. The only reason that they would put travel restrictions in place, and this is statistically, once again, forward-looking, and I've picked up data from the outbreaks as far back, I mean, what available data there is. You have to remember, the further you go back in time, a little bit harder it gets, but incidents of the bubonic plague, which got a lot of publicity, and, of course, the Spanish flu, which was actually more deadly, that doesn't get nearly the publicity that the bubonic plague does. But I've used data from those incidents, and I went, wait a minute. There's only one reason you would want to restrict travel. Okay, restrict travel prior to the outbreak, or prior to, quote unquote, the big one, which what that may be is anybody's guess. There's only one reason. It's because there's going to be safe zones, and then there's going to be not so safe zones, danger zones. Okay, so that's the statistical data that's been coming back to me. I'm going, and it makes sense to me, even as just an independent and critical thinker, of going, why? You know, why would that be? You know, why would you want to restrict travel before the outbreak if there's this big conspiracy of global population control? No, it's targeted population control. So that's once again doing everything by the numbers, and sometimes it is difficult to remain arbitrary. But again, that's, you know, ISIS. I mean, seriously, what do they have? Like the greatest screen printing shop in the entire Middle East at their disposal? I mean, where the hell did all the flags and the T-shirts come from? And it's that same picture over and over again. And I think at this point people have to stop, because I tell you right now, one of the things that's statistically showing up is, aren't we about due for another false flag event? Doesn't that seem about right now? We're starting to lose a little of the political capital and the patriotic capital of 9/11. That's starting to wear off, and people are starting to become critical thinkers again. Aren't we due for another hacksaw Jim Duggan, brain-dead, blind wave the flag, USA type of event, you know, just to take people's mind off of what's really happening? You know, that's to me now, and I'm gonna toss it back to V a little bit, but to me now, if and when that happens, statistically, there's a real possibility. If and when that happens, I would just love to see one thing, guys. I would love to see nobody show up at the benefit concerts that always seem to be so carefully planned and ready to go right in the wake of these events, right? Nobody show up there. Nobody show up. Nobody tune in. Nobody do anything other than go home and research and critically think and figure out what if what you're seeing is a real act of terror or it's a yet another, piece of the puzzle or yet another part of the stagecraft that's been going on. That, to me, is a mark of patriotism, more so than just doing the knee-jerk Pavlovian UFA routine that I think the powers that be right now have come to rely on. And when that's not there, you're going to see some chaos.
I agree with you with respect to ISIS. Look, the head of the FBI said in an interview that was broadcast last night, I believe it was 60 Minutes, that the U.S. is preparing for an imminent terrorist attack, James Comey. Now, he was pointing to a relative, what's that? Okay, yeah, he was pointing to a relative of ISIS, the Khorasan group, or an al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, who are reportedly, allegedly planning on striking the United States or Western interests. Now, here's what I found interesting. Everything, all the finger pointing here, V, is pointing to Syria. And isn't Syria what we were initially, or what we set out to do, to topple, take out Assad back with the Arab Spring, as well as what was exposed via Benghazi? So if we can't get them one way, if the public support for invading, bombing Syria is absent, let's have a terror attack on U.S. soil, and of course that will garner public support for attacking Syria because of their purported support of this questionably existent Khorasan group, as well as the al-Qaeda affiliate, and of course ISIS.
Absolutely. The look at Khorasan. Where the heck did they come from? Out of nowhere, literally sprung out. All these are all al-Qaeda variance groups. Al-Qaeda 2.0 is ISIS. Al-Qaeda 2.1 is Khorasan. Then you have the Israeli operations running, which is Hamas. Hamas is an Israeli Mossad creation. Same thing with al-Nusra. Hence, Israel was providing air cover for al-Nusra when Syria's Assad was going after al-Qaeda in the Golan and was trying to bomb the heck out of the al-Qaeda units over there. And then what did Israel do? They shot down the Syrian plane deep into Syrian territory to make sure that the al-Qaeda fighters don't get hurt. Folks, you're being gamed. You're being gamed at a grand scale because these guys are losing it. They're losing their entire petrodollar advantage. They're losing their whole entire system, and they're about to lose their shirts. And so, their only response is conflict. And unfortunately, it's a desperate and very, very stupid maneuver that at the end of this break, when we come back, we're going to kind of flesh out for you exactly what the Russians and Chinese are doing to counter this whole nonsense, and the end will not be pretty, Doug.
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And with that, we will take the top of the hour break. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, October 6, 2014. Our very special guest tonight, we have V. His website is roguemoney.net.
And welcome back, listeners throughout the United States and worldwide, to this very special Monday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Two very special guests tonight. V, the Guerrilla Economist, his website, roguemoney.net. Also, Michael Rosecliffe, who founds and directs something called ArcLight Institute, the ArcLight Institute. His website, thearclightinstitute.wordpress.com. You can find him on the internet at that location. ArcLight is A-R-C, like Arc, Light Institute, all one word, .wordpress.com. And just to give folks, just to let you know a little bit about Mr. Rosecliffe, as he mentioned, for those unfamiliar with his work and what ArcLight is it's a product of really 10 years worth, and a decade, 15 years worth of work following the events of 9/11. A small but elite group of technologists from a variety of disciplines chose to set out and do what most people would consider the impossible, that is to design a system that uses a variety of metrics to predict future global occurrences, as well as decode past events. Yeah, not too possible, according to many. And, of course, you can find this information on his website, the arclightinstitute.wordpress.com. Check it out. I would urge you to do that. V, the Guerrilla Economist at roguemoney.net. We're going to turn it over to V with regard to events in Syria, the wars, unending wars over there, Iraq, Afghanistan, ISIS. Take us where we need to go in that regard, as you mentioned this before the break.
Absolutely, Doug. In a move that it could only be categorized as backstabbing. And I've often said this before on the show many times. I said, we are being isolated. We're being isolated. We're being exposed. We're being vetted as the source of all the world's ailments, okay? And one of the things I want to talk about is this financial backstabbing. What I mean by that is this. I kind of detail for you guys what's been going on with the Germans and the French. Okay, what people don't realize is before these so-called U.S. factions were hitting the Russian economy, okay, and they, first of all, you cannot isolate any country that has a strong trade relationship with China. That's joke number one. Joke number two is a debtor nation cannot wield sanctions against one of its creditors. Okay,
yeah.
Joke number two.
Yeah.
All right, and the third thing. All right, look, and I've always said this: the City of London Corporation is basically the nexus around which all these things spin. All right, and what did the City of London this past couple of weeks? What did they announce in the last week or so? Huh? Well, this is what they announced. The UK, okay, the City of London is going to start issuing yuan bonds. Okay, now let that be a absolute financial thermonuclear bomb going off in your brain, because that's huge. You want to talk about breaking the petrodollar? That's massive. Because here it is. The UK will become the first country outside of China issuing Chinese bonds. And then on top of that, Germany is also seeking to do the same thing. So they're in a race to start issuing yuan bonds. That's massive. The question is why? Well, folks, Europe is very, very dependent upon Russian energy. So the only thing keeping the economies of Europe afloat right now is, number one, is Russian energy, because they need it to run their economy. And why is the UK and why soon to be Germany? Why will they issue euro bonds? Why? Don't they got euro bonds? Don't they got enough bonds to deal with, folks? Well, the answer is, you see, every single one of those European nations are broke. They are insolvent, okay? So those EU economies will be floating on Russian energy and Chinese liquidity. That is what's keeping them afloat. Not the dollar, not the euro, not anything else. So the question becomes, will they support the United States in any sort of a full-scale action against the Russians and the Chinese? Absolutely not. And right now it's all cutesy-wootsy with these guys who are rank amateurs. Okay? Up until the time that Putin wakes up and says, you know what, enough's enough. And then, like what Mike Roscoe says, hits the F the petrodollar button. Or we can even take it one step further. When China, the 800-pound dragon that's been sitting quietly in the room, begins to rouse itself, then what do you do? Then it's not fun and games anymore. Then it goes from a proxy war to a total full-blown collapse. Because, guys, we are so vulnerable economically. The underbelly of our nation is so exposed. I mean, this is the joke of all jokes, because here you have the United States, the most broke, insolvent nation on the planet, who's part of the G7, which is what I call the insolvent seven. Okay, a club, an elite club of broke, insolvent nations, and they are going up against the most commodity-rich, industrially capable, fiercely, powerful nations. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out who's going to wind up winning this whole entire thing. It's tremendous. It's tremendous. I mean, you look at, you watch France carefully. Look at their current president, that socialist moron, Francois Hollande. The man has anywhere between a 12 and a 17% approval rating. In other words, he's not going to win re-election. He's going to get tossed out. And I guarantee you, and even Mike will probably run looking glass on this, it'll tell you it's going to be somebody who's going to be right of center, who's going to be very nationalistic, taking the reins of France. And if that happens, which it will, I guarantee you it will, you can say bye-bye to any sort of U.S. cooperation. So this is what's happening in Europe. Then you look at the Middle East. You look at how Qatar is saying, okay, we don't want to go about and be part of what the U.S. is doing. They're signing energy deals with the Iranians. And the Saudis are eventually going to sign the deal with the Iranians as well, because the dirty secret, folks, Iran sits on the largest oil reserves in the Middle East. That's why they've been demonized. Why do you think the banking state that clothes itself in religion, that flies the Rothschild Bank, happens to sit off the coast of the Med, always is after Iran? Because they sit on the largest reserve of petroleum in the Middle East, and they are doing trades in gold and in other currencies besides the dollar. That is a big no-no. Saddam tried to do it, and what happened to him? We deposed him very quickly, didn't we?
True.
So one of the things a lot of these nations of the world are starting to learn, Doug, is that being economically tied to the Russians and the Chinese is far more important than some broke, insolvent club called NATO. And we're seeing not only, what Mike said earlier, the complete fall apart of the Eurozone and the reordering of the Eurozone, but we're seeing the end of NATO. NATO is going to be reformed into something totally different. And you're going to see the IMF go the same way. And the World Bank. It's all done. It's all being replaced. This old guard is going away. Mike, you want to add to that?
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of how the game is being played now, a lot of people like to use chess as an example, and I've never really been a fan of that. I said the only way chess would really be relevant to what's going on right now is if instead of a board you had a cube and the pieces could pass through the cube. That's how complex a lot of this has gotten. Kind of an interesting analogy, but when you think about it, it does paint a fairly accurate picture of what's going on. And to speak to V's suggestion to run looking glass in terms of coming French elections, that's almost unnecessary. I'll do it for the sake of completeness. But yeah, there's 17% accurate, 17% approval rate in France. That's not re-election there. So you're going to start to see a right-of-center leader there, and you're going to start to see more of these fiscal conservatives start to side with the BRICS nations led up by China. Those are statistics that I've already seen all over the place in Looking Glass. And V had mentioned something earlier that was kind of shocking to folks that I just really started speaking to about regarding Looking Glass. As I said about 2.5 weeks ago, I'd mentioned this to V and Dale Pinkert, again, fxroom.com. Very, very special guy, very awesome guy, and the guy that introduced yours truly to V. I said, keep an eye, and it popped right up on the look, and I said, keep an eye on the Australian dollar and the New Zealand dollar, and I still encourage people to do that. And the reason is those two currencies are the first of many that are going to tell a story. And that story is going to be the increasing tension between the BRICS nations and the Anglo-Western banking system. And sure enough, literally to the day, that Looking Glass predicted it, and V can vouch for this, literally to the day, all of a sudden you start to see all these bizarre, weirdo world anomalies taking place, on the charts of the AUD and the NZD. And I said, and there we go. I said, it's going to be now. Most nations are going to have to, choose a side, and that's going to be, Anglo-Western banking, and and V paints a very bright, sarcastic picture of what the EU Anglo-Western banking system looks like, and what the BRICS nations are doing. So you're starting to see that move towards the BRICS nations. To that end, as far as what's going on in Europe right now, I mean, I don't think people realize just how delicate a situation that is. how much leverage that as a result of, and Avid mentioned it, the Guar well pumping water, that's not good. You have to realize that the most brilliant strategist in the entire equation, who was lampooned and made fun of, if you remember, when he was first put into office for his shirtless horseback riding pictures and his fishing pictures and all that fun stuff, was Vlad Putin. He sat back, he waited, probably painfully at times because he's sitting there going, my God, I could wipe the floor with these guys anytime I want. He sat back and he waited. Now he's got about 30,000. I think V can speak to the details. I'm more of a macro guy. V is more certainly a microeconomics guy. But there's a man sitting on piles of resources, industrial, piles of precious metals, 30,000 odd metric tons of gold. He's got an alliance with the only other industrial powerhouse, as far as I'm concerned, right now on the planet. Thy name is China. And, to that end, you look at the relevance now of the Middle East, and that the relevance of the Middle East in terms of an oil producer is starting to, I don't want to say be completely marginalized, but statistically be somewhat marginalized. So geopolitically, all the pieces on that cube of a chessboard are starting to move all over the place. And the guy holding all the cards right now is Vlad. And I tell people, I said, I'm sure he's a nice guy. He's just not the kind of guy you want to make angry. But to that end, and the arrogance of the United States in terms of, believing that people are just going to continue to go along with a dollar-backed petro. But why? A petrodollar, to what ends, to what advantage? What advantage does the petrodollar offer right now that, say, a petro yuan or a petro ruble, or better yet, a combination of the two, call it the petro mark if you like, what does that petrodollar offer? And V had mentioned it also, is the fact that NATO, on a militaristic level, we haven't even touched this yet. I'm an aviation freak. I love airplanes. I have since I've been about 5 years old. First time I ever opened up a book and saw an SR-71 Blackbird. I was in love with aviation from then on out and have been ever since. We don't even want to talk about a military conflict, a full-scale shooting war between East and West, because I guarantee you there are Western world pilots of all varieties that have never come face to face with an Su-35 or an Su-37 or an Su-47. Most people would like to have passed off Russia's military as pretty much crap for sale on eBay, okay, like surplus stuff, like Akula-class submarines from like 40 years ago. Anything but. And in terms of a mechanized force, in terms of an aviation force, some of the technology that they have, up to and including ACES radar, 5 varieties of air-to-air missiles, you don't play with them. They don't play nice when confronted, okay? So to that capacity, I think it's kind of almost a situation where if the United States, their best interest at this point would be to back up and figure out what's going on domestically, and handle the situation accordingly. Because if they continue to push the issue with Vlad, that's not a guy you want to react. That's not a nation you want to react at. I can promise that much. But in terms of economics and geopolitics and what's going on right now. Again, you take a look at something like the Power of Siberia pipeline that was recently constructed. That's not an accident. That's an entire global mindset shift away from, USA, America number one to, there are finally alternatives. Would you look at that? So that's a trend statistically, and it shows up in a lot of different varieties of data search. Every once in a while, you start to see the same thing. Anybody that knows nonlinear math will tell you this. You start to see the same thing over and over again. I've always said once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence, more than 3 times, and you start seeing it on really different searches. You got to start to ask yourself, what's really going on here, and what's the play? And I'm going to let V take it from there, but a lot of the data, it's kind of funny. We arrive a lot of the times at the same conclusions, just using completely different methods, which in and of itself should speak volumes to the fact that he's got quite a few awesome sources all over the place from his career in banking and so forth, and my doing what I'm doing with Looking Glass. When those two things start to agree, man, that's when even I have to sit back and go, wow, this is all very for real. And I think at this point in time, it's time for a lot of the Western world to kind of do a little bit of a reevaluation of where they stand, because, like I said, I know there's a lot of European nations, and I'm sure there's plenty of Western nations that kind of regret lampooning and underestimating Vlad. It's just not something you want to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Putin does hold many of the cards, or is in charge of the multidimensional chessboard here. Now, I got to tell you, V, I've been getting a lot of emails here, and Mr. Rosecliffe, about the many questions that speak to everything you're speaking to right now, or that address everything you're speaking to right now. Let me just ask you about this. This is something over the weekend I was thinking about. Somebody brought this up, and I thought I'd better ask this. If we look at the military, well, Mike, you mentioned the military component here, the air power, the superiority, and of course, folks. I mean, if you go back to September, I think it was September 22nd, the United States, launched airstrikes against ISIS in Syria. We used 47 Tomahawk missiles at $1.5 million a pop, and I think it's a very effective weapon. It delivers its ordnance very precisely without risking any pilot's life. But what we're seeing, or what we've seen over the last 5.5 years, defense cuts that are limiting the production of the Tomahawk missiles. Only 100 Tomahawks next year, for example. Weapons procurement showed striking reductions from last year and even the year prior. The Navy, when they planned to buy nearly 1,000 tactical Tomahawks, that was cut down by almost 90%. Now you take that, okay? You take those, you keep that in the back. And our military, by the way, is I think our Navy as well as our actual military is less than resources than we had before World War II, if my numbers are correct here, if my stats are correct, and I think they are. So looking at all of this, now let me throw in one more thing, and I'm going to turn it over to you, V, because again, this is kind of an amalgamation of questions here. Hopefully we can address, them all. Looking at all of this together, the dollar demise, the petrodollar demise, we heard Kyle Bass interview, we believe it was Timothy Geithner, about the death of the dollar. You've talked about this many times on our show. We have a couple of people writing in, including JB. I'll just put you there, identify as JB, asking this, and this is reflective of many other questions. V, do you and Mike believe there are elements of the New World Order whose job it is to maintain the petrodollar, while others are to take it down? So in other words, dueling banjos here with regard to the petrodollar. And they do it unknowingly of their master plan. In other words, compartmentalization. Okay, and that goes to Katie, John, and Mark from other countries, or from other areas of the country. Hopefully that folds your question in. So do you think the lines are between the masters and their stooges, politically, financially, while they're all are thinking they are all knowing in the plan of the New World Order, deliberately compartmentalized, or is there something else beyond that, what I just asked?
I mean, ultimately, there's a great cosmic conspiracy behind this whole entire thing. There is a back and forth between the arms of control, so to speak, and there is a power struggle. There's often what is called a dance between the male and female energies, okay, of the universe, or as W would like to put it at times, there's what's called back and forth, who's on top, who's on bottom, male versus female type thing going on, back and forth when it comes to these leaders that are at play. The exact rudiments, it's very difficult for any of us to know at this level, but one thing we can look to is some of the facts. The fact is that when you look at our stuff on your earlier question about the military, not only are they cutting budgets where the surplus is on Tomahawk cruise missiles, which by the way is an old missile and is literally a piece of crap compared to what the Chinese and the Russians are fielding, which have cruise missiles that are over a generation more advanced. Okay, so it's pretty sad. So not only are we fielding old aircraft and old missiles, we're also being budget cutted and surplused out. So we're not even, we don't even have the type of inventory that we once used to have. So this is a very bad predicament. It's something that's definitely done on purpose to definitely weaken us. Hopefully that kind of touches base on that, Doug, in regards to the military aspect of it all. I mean, in terms of aircraft, I mean, I don't even want to go into the F-22 that can't fly over 22,000 feet, or the F-35, which is a flying pig that can't turn, that can't fly, that can't fight. What the Russians and the Chinese have are far more advanced, better aircraft, better missiles, better radars. And while our troops are being neutered by reformatted physical training and boot camps and stuff, the Russians are still, and the Chinese are still running a very tight ship. Mike, you want to add anything to that?
Absolutely, and that's I think one of the first things I've ever heard you, when I say you, I mean V. One of the first things I heard you say on one of the shows that I listened to you was alluded to the fact that the United States military has the best marketing at the moment, and that is 1,000% true statistically. And I would like to confirm also, Mr. Hagmann, there is you said troop reserves and so forth are at the lowest level they have been since World War II. That is a metric that I've run on Looking Glass, and I would say slightly below that. But more importantly is morale. Okay, a collective U.S. military morale right now is at an absolute all-time low, and and you're seeing that. And like I said, you saw that with Obama, letting go of top generals and so forth. The United States is not really in any position to project power, and yet they always seem to be the first ones to start conflict, which brings it back to, you look at Russia throughout history. That goes back to the days of the czars. Russia doesn't start fights. Russia ends fights. Okay, you look at the attack during World War II. You want to try taking Stalingrad. That's fine. You can try. We'll just kill you till you get tired. And that was basically, their approach. But in terms of militaristically, yeah, there is a big technology gap. And one of the things that statistically I observed, and I spoke with V about this, with his background in defense technology, was that, is it my imagination, or statistically is technology developed in the United States, be it the VSTOL technology of the J-35, which is, as V alludes to the fact, is a flying pig, and I think that's an offense to pigs everywhere that might take flight at some point. But you look at the Raptor, and then you start looking at aircraft like the Su-37 and the T-50, those kind of airframes, and you go like, wait a minute, didn't the United States develop that technology? So it makes you wonder where all the technology and the patents that are being developed in the States are going. So that's something I would just like to maybe start a discussion on amongst your listeners too. And it's like, start looking around, because there's airplanes out there like the T-50, for instance. It almost looks like what the Raptor should have looked like.
It's a good point. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's food for thought. I mean, V and I also agree that our favorite airplane between the two of us, or one of our favorite airplanes, we have a few, but one of our favorite airplanes was the YF-23 Black Widow. Not very many people remember that. It was a truly revolutionary aircraft that the United States Air Force, for I'm sure reasons to be disclosed, chose the F-22 over the YF-23. And you go over to you go look at China, and you go look at Russia, and all of a sudden you realize that a lot of the technology that went into the YF-23, which was a fantastic airframe, that, I mean, if you look at it fly, it looks like a friggin' UFO. That really was a tactically advantageous aircraft. And 3/4 of the technology that went into that airplane spontaneously appear in Soviet bloc. I don't even want to use that word anymore, but Eastern Bloc aircraft. So, and I believe it was on a previous show, but V had mentioned that perhaps as early as the Clinton administration, that a lot of the patent military technology, a lot of the patent database, perhaps all of it, was essentially given to China. And I heard that, and I just wanted to stand up and cheer. And I said, well, at least somebody else saw that, and it wasn't just me. But in terms of military, that's not something the United States wants to do, is to initiate any kind of like real conflict with the East, because you have to remember, there's from a war fighting standpoint, the East and the West have a very different approach, and the West seems to have suffered from some level of post-Vietnam War winning guilt. You know, the United States does not wage something called total war. The United States wages a dog and pony show war. Okay, which is, yeah, we'll send some troops, yeah, we'll send some sound bites back, and, you know, there's this, you know, we're very careful not to do any collateral damage, and we're very careful, we don't want to knock over any buildings or anything. You start a war with Russians, you see how much, I guarantee you, the amount of craps, you cannot afford to hire a fleet of trucks large enough to haul away all the craps that the Eastern world does not give about collateral damage. That's fact. Those are not guys you want to start with. Like I said, they end fights. They don't start them. So there's that paradigm shift, or that enigmatic difference in mentality towards conflict between East and West. Okay, and that's just something, I don't know if that debate has even been tabled yet, but given the technological differences, and I follow that stuff closely, only because, like I said, my idea of a good time is and maybe I'm going to mention this on the air. I'm going to hold V to this. And one of these days we got to get to an air show together, because my idea of fun is watching airplanes fly all day. But there is a serious difference in morale. There's a serious difference in you know, the mentality of an Eastern versus a Western world commander's perspective. And those are all, again, statistics that I've run. Statistically, you look at the way Eastern nations fight wars, even amongst themselves sometimes, you know, within Europe, there's a kill 'em all, let God sort 'em out mentality, as opposed to a Western world that seems to have been plagued by some fear of militaristic success in, you know, in terms of a war-fighting doctrine. And the fact that Obama is almost seemingly intentionally tried to emasculate the United States military, something I've been saying for years, or since his administration started. I said, you know, that's something I think, and Americans are oblivious to it, of course. You know, and they get their sound bites and their yellow ribbons and everything, and I'm as patriotic as anybody else out there. But at this point in time, I think it's time, you know, Americans start to wake up and go, wait a minute, what's really going on here? You know, so I'm going to pass it back to V there, and that's my addition as far as militaristically. I think one of the most important things that people can analyze, and again, this is based on spatial data, and, you know, I'll give you an example. I'm a big fan of history. World War II, most of the footage you see, or most of the photos that you see, are from the Western Front. You know, people want to see what hell on earth looks like. Go look at the Eastern Front of the Germans fighting the Soviets. You know, Stalingrad, Leningrad. You know, I mean, you're talking like, you know, the kind of stuff that there's just, I don't think, nearly enough coverage of it. Even when you watch, like, the military channel, everything's always, you know, the Battle of the Bulge and, you know, and so on and so forth. You look at what Stalingrad looked like, and that's a war, you know. So to that end, I'd like to pass it back to V, and maybe he can add something, too, because I know he's got his background in the defense industry. But, again, that's Looking Glass's take, and I think we've actually seen it. I'm going to, once again, want to pass back to V before I get into it, but there was actually an attempt by that lovely banking state hiding behind religion that flies the Rothschild flag to try to actively start World War III recently. And I'm going to let V go before I get into that, because that's another one of my more polished diatribes, shall we say.
Well, you know, the thing that a lot of people escape is this. You know, one of the things I try to highlight is that we are right now in the most dangerous economic situation the world's ever seen. We're in that zone particularly because we are on the verge and the cusp of losing our world reserve currency status. Okay, number one. Number two, we have leaders and leadership in this country that only thinks in 4-year increments. That's a problem. Most people, when I tell them that, hey, you know what, China's minimal, you know, year-on-end vision plans are anywhere between 40 to 100 years. That's their smallest, you know, they don't have 4-year plans. They have 40, they have 50 years, they have 100-year plans. So their thought of thinking is quite different, number one. Number two, their goal is to conquer their enemy without firing a shot. That's Sun Tzu's Art of War right there. Okay, second chapter, third paragraph pretty much, is to conquer your enemy without firing a shot. And while the U.S. has been following this idiotic British model of empire building, which leads nothing but your own self-destruction, leaves you impoverished, leaves you broke, creates a disparity of wealth that the likes of which the world has never seen. It happens every time. So the U.S. has been following that model so effectively. And what have the Chinese been doing? They've been following a relational empire. They've been following an empire where they are looking to build businesses. Okay, so that's number one. They're looking to create mutually beneficial trade zones. They're looking to create influential partnerships. And now they're having an empire built on trade, on commerce. Not so much on the military, but they have enough of the military that if you were to try something, they'll take care of you really quick. Okay? And the biggest thing here, folks, is this. Unlike the U.S., China has a real economy. All right? And China is very well aware that the U.S. economic numbers are completely made up, that we have phantom growth, that we've been, honestly, we've been living off the printing press for the last 40 years, all right? And that, and like I said earlier, 50% of our GDP is nothing but reshuffled debt that's been given the label as government expenditure and is being counted as growth. And it's, of course, it's been infused with central bank bond buying, okay? So today we're an absolute laughingstock. So, in other words, we have painted ourselves into such a corner that the world is looking at us and saying, you know what, this country is not fit to be world reserve currency. This country is not fit to have oil, the lifeblood of the economy, to be priced in their currency terms. It's just not fit. And we're seeing this trend moving away from that. And you know what, we don't have a strategy because these idiots that are in office, rather than taking care of the domestic issues, rather than forging mutually beneficial trade agreements and partnerships, are out there blowing things up. And we're seeing the absolute blowback of this entire thing. So now we're facing a new thing. And earlier in the program, I detailed for you folks, I said, you know what, we are facing a time where look at the Baltic Dry Index, look at commodity prices, look at the oil prices, all these things are converging down, which is a sign that the dollar's dying. But for some strange reason, the U.S. dollar index, the DXY, is abnormally high. And why is the U.S. dollar index high? There's a reason for it. Number one, well, you got all the scaredy cats from Europe and the Eurozone that are, pumping the money back into the U.S. dollar and buying the dollar. That's propping it up. And that's just one of the things. Now, the other thing, here's a little strategy here. There are strong rumors, folks. And Mike actually ran a looking glass on this as well. We kind of briefly touched upon it, I think, last week or so. But there are strong rumors that they will take the debt out to 30,000 points before the end of all things. Now, that sounds insane. That sounds crazy. But bear with me for just a second. I'm going to explain myself, okay? How do you counter? And remember, early in the broadcast, I said, you know what? The West is losing price discovery, okay? Their electronic silver exchanges turned out to be a gigantic failure. The fraud in the global in the gold market is a very well documented thing. In fact, the fraud in the gold market right now is being counted as being more severe than the fraud in the LIBOR market. So now, on top of that, you have the Shanghai Gold Exchange that has opened up for business, and more physical gold is moving to the Shanghai Gold Exchange than any other exchange on the planet. More than the CME, more than the LME, any of that. Okay, so this is huge. All right, so we're about to lose price discovery, and the West knows that. So knowing that once the price discovery is gone, and then you have a massive rise in gold and silver, and people say, well, where are gold and silver going to be? Well, I can possibly say, and Mike will probably have to run looking glass on this, I can possibly say by the end of 2016 or sometime, we could possibly see $5,000 an ounce gold, $800 to maybe $1,000 an ounce for silver by the middle or the end of 2016. And how do you counter that? What is the tactic that these guys are going to do to counter that? They're going to take the Dow to 30,000 points and the U.S. dollar index sky high. That's the only way they can counter it. But the rest of the world is not going to buy into that nonsense because they're going to see the fraud for what it is. This is to, again, inoculate the American public before the final crash, number one. And number two, I mean, let's be honest here. When the Dow crashed in 2008, okay, we went from a 14,000 point Dow, all right, down to 8,000. I mean, it was a dramatic crash. Okay, so 14,000 point high to today's 17,000 point high. That's not big enough. They need to take the market higher to create the most amount of damage. And all the suckers and all those with weak hands who can't hold their gold and silver, who don't have an exit strategy, who are just sitting around, don't know what the heck they're doing, are going to start dumping their assets. Okay, they're going to start buying paper. It's going to create a fool's rally, and all the fools will rush in. And then when they pop this thing at 30,000 points, it will be absolutely catastrophic. For then, there's the level that can create the most amount of destruction. It's that bad. Okay. Now, imagine that type of velocity, that type of crash. It's unbelievable, folks, because you have an environment where there is no real performance. You have an environment where there's artificial volume. You have an environment where you have no money velocity. So it's into this environment that if they push the Dow to 30,000 points and then bring it down, oh my God, the results will be absolutely horrific. Mike, you want to add to that?
If I can just,
sure, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, if I can just jump in here for a second. People will say, well, this horror show with precious metals. I mean, it just seems like everybody has been wrong, and I say that. I'm talking about the people who say, well, watch silver, it's going to go up. Watch gold, it's going to go up. Yet it's getting beaten down. Now you said you've called it to be beaten down, and it has been. The last 6 months, I think it's been perhaps the worst in the last 6 years, if not the last 60 years. I don't know. It just seems like it's impossible to judge. But here's my thought on this. When the demand for physical, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because at some point there's going to be a demand for physical delivery, right? I mean, isn't that correct? Whether it be gold, silver, whatever the precious metal or whatever the commodity might be, there's going to be a demand for physical delivery. When that demand it makes its way to the marketplace, isn't that when we're going to see the prices go up? Because there's no way that J.P. Morgan Chase and others can beat down the price if they can't physically deliver.
Yeah, that's a great question. The demand for physical delivery has been happening since 2008. It's been happening globally. The biggest people that are asking for physical delivery are not your individual investors. They're too busy trying to figure out what Apple stocks are going to do tomorrow. The biggest investors that are asking for physical delivery are sovereigns, are nations. And what's been happening since in London? London at one point was being drained by 1,000 metric tons of gold per month. 1,000, okay, every month out of London. That number has subsided because there's hardly any gold left. Look at J.P. Morgan. What did they do? They sold their headquarters in One Chase Plaza in Manhattan, and they sold that building. That's their headquarters, which has the largest private vault on the planet. It's about the size of a football field, 5 stories below Liberty Street, connected to the New York Fed, and they sold it with all the gold that's in it. It was out. It's already been sold to the Chinese. Okay, the BRIC nations have been buying gold and hard assets at a rapid clip, and they've been demanding. Who else is demanding? Well, take a look at Germany. Germany has demanded that over 300 metric tons of their gold be returned to them from the New York Fed. And what has the New York Fed done? They've been stalling. They've only returned about 5 metric tons, but they had no problem stealing 34 metric tons out of Ukrainian gold in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. in the morning. They had no problems doing that. And Germany sees that. They see the duplicity of the United States. So there is massive physical demand and contract settlement. The way it's working right now is they have so much paper, so much high-frequency trading going on with every single one of these commodities exchanges that they're keeping the dog and pony show going. Case in point, the CME gets a demand for delivery on a certain contract. They obviously don't have the ounces to cover. So what do? They give Delaware Depository a call. And all of a sudden, here's some Joe Blow who thinks he's got a secure account with the Delaware Depository because they're keeping accurate book counts over there. And all of a sudden, he's seeing his gold being used. Well, he doesn't see it. His gold is actually taken right out of his account and given to the CME to make sure that the contract settlement is taken care of. This charade will continue. And what's going to happen is before the collapse is once the average idiot investor who stops watching the Apple stocks and the Google stocks and says, hey, you know what? Gold has hit $5,000, $6,000 an ounce today. The dollar, even though it looks strong, there's a lot of bad economic news, domestically and internationally. Things are changing so much. Maybe I should call up, the Delaware Depository. Maybe I should call up COMEX and ask for my gold back. And all of a sudden, they give a call to their broker and say, hey, you know what? I'll take delivery of my gold. And the broker says, well, we really don't have it at the time. How about we just cut you a check for the total value? And most people, 99.99% of people, will take a paper check denominated in U.S. dollars than their actual physical delivery. That's the idiot investor. I see that all the time. These people, they buy high, they sell low. It happens all the time. They don't understand, number one. Number two, they don't see the what's at play here. They don't see the great risk of what's happening. Even today, I get emails, I get phone calls. Hey, you think I should go into the market to trade? And me and Rosecliffe always says this. He says, we always say if you want to go trade in the market and you're savvy about it and you're good, you go ahead and trade, but get out. But don't go invest nothing. But then I get emails. People are, well, V, what should I invest in? Metals. That's the only investment. That's the only exploit you have. That's it. There's no other exploit you can leverage here. And people are like, well, I own this stock. You own nothing. You don't own stock in this country.
No,
it's paper.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's owned by the DTCC. That's who owns it. The DTCC owns all the stocks, all the bonds, all the mortgage titles. All of it is owned by the DTCC. That's the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. They own it all, and they hold all of it in a trust fund. And the nominee of the trust is Seed and Company. Okay, and Seed is spelled C-E-D-E, meaning like you're giving something up. Seed and Company. The question is, who owns Seed and Company? City of London.
Wow. Okay. Well, exactly. And by the way, in the event that the workers over at the Chase, the Chinese bought J.P. Morgan Chase, right? The building, the Manhattan building. Yep. Right. Yep. In case they get tired of working at that building, they can always stop at their new digs now. I don't know whether you heard this. You probably did. The Waldorf Astoria is now owned by the Chinese. That should.
Yeah. I knew about that. And here's one thing for you folks that are listening in Radio Land. The Chinese own over 65% of Manhattan. They own over 65%. Whose game? And then people are going to give me a call and say, hey, what kind of stock should I buy? What kind of annuity should I get? Are you mad? You should be thinking about getting into hard assets and internationalizing yourself. That's it. Either you internationalize yourself away if you're going to stay here, or if you're not going to stay here, or if you're going to stay here, you better figure out, hey, you need to go to a good location to weather this coming storm. And that's the only thing. There's no, hey, what should I buy? And folks, let me tell you something. When a company does an IPO, okay, when they do an IPO and they decide to, bring that IPO out, when you look at the legal jargon, when you look at the fine letters, okay, that company's IPO, by contractual obligation, that stock of that company is owned by the DTCC. They are contractually obligated to hold that stock. And you, when you buy an Apple stock or Google or GE or Ford or anything like that, you're just what's called a beneficiary owner. That's it. You're a beneficiary. In other words, your ownership of that stock can be null and void and can be revoked at any time without your knowledge or discretion. You don't own nothing.
Wow.
That's why we say it's a gold and silver, precious metals is the only exploit you have. And people are like, well, oh my God, $16.86 and $17.20. V, what do? I bought it $32. I bought it $27. Folks, here's the thing. When if I give you, okay, and I like to use this analogy a lot, and Mike knows about this, picture, if you will, look at Ferrari's newest car, the Ferrari LaFerrari. That is a gorgeous piece of machinery. Okay, here's a $1.5 million car, and you and I know that this car is worth $1.5 million. It's a 900 some odd horsepower missile, and then all of a sudden, some guy's like, well, it's on sale. We'll give it to you for $4,000. Or somebody value, and not give it to you for $4,000, but somebody values it at $4,000, and then some other schmuck says, you know what, it's $5,000. Another schmuck says, oh, it's $20, or another idiot says it's $20,000 or $30,000. You have to laugh at them, because you and I both know the absolute real intrinsic value of this car is over $1.5 million. So are you worried about the price being 10 grand today or 20 grand tomorrow or 5 grand today? No, you're going to hold on to it until it reaches that full maturity where you know that the shenanigans and the charade is going to be over and the full price is going to be brought to bear. Same thing with gold and silver. Gold and silver, I know what the real value of gold and silver is, so I don't care if it goes from $1,700 an ounce down to $1,200 an ounce, back up to $1,500 an ounce, goes down to $1,300 an ounce, or same thing with silver. You got to keep getting it. You got to keep getting it. For those who can't afford it, I mean, I've started a program with Carrot Bars. Every week I get a gram of gold. I mean, how awesome is that? A gram of gold every week delivered to my house. It's fantastic. So you have to get out of this idiotic thinking. People are using traditional stock investment strategies from a traditional stock market, and they're applying it to a market that has no sense of direction, has no bearing on reality, and they're applying those principles on a hard asset that is infinitely more valuable than any stock position you can own. I mean, Doug, here, let's be honest here. Gold versus the dollar. Look at when the dollar was brought, when the Fed took over the dollar in 1913. Since then, the dollar has lost 98% of its value versus gold. Okay, the dollar has lost 96.8% of its value versus silver. And all what guys like me and Rosecliffe and others are just trying to tell you folks is that you're going to lose the last 2 to 3% that you have remaining in terms of purchasing power. And the only luxury you've had is that we've been able to offload, a lot of our hyperinflation abroad. We've been able to stuff it away in different hidey holes. Okay, Euroclear in Belgium, perfect hidey hole. Where all these bonds that the Russians and the Chinese have been dumping? They've been dumping bonds that alarmingly, it's gone unreported. But where's it winding up? It's winding up in Belgium. It's winding up in a company called Euroclear. Now, who the heck is Euroclear? Well, J.P. Morgan set it up back in 1968. It's a little hidey hole. So they're doing everything they can to hide the inflation. They're doing everything they can to spin and have all this propaganda about the conflict in the Middle East, about the Ukraine, about all these things, but they can't plug all the holes in the dike. This thing is about to break loose, and people are going to find out, hey, you know what? The United States is a reckless country that goes around destroying nations. Look at the Ukraine. You know what's the hottest thing right now in the Ukrainian economy? Organ harvesting. That is the hottest thing right now. People are so broke they're willing to have one of their
church organs or
absolutely. Steinways are a hot commodity.
Steinways. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
But I mean, that's what's going on. Mike, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I call it. I guess I'll ask V. Can I use my burning mall analogy when it comes to the market?
Yep, absolutely, man. That's a good one.
All right. When I people ask myself, and you have to realize when I first went public with the Looking Glass software, and of course, just to kind of prove how accurate it was, I had a little bit of fun where I would actually unleash it on individual equities. And I'll let V tell some of the stories as far as like he put a few requests in as far as hey, can you take a look at this? Can you look at that? But of course, done so with a trader's mentality. And when I say trader's mentality, a lot of folks will say, well, it sounds like these guys are saying don't trade the market, stay as far away from the market as you possibly can. That's not necessarily true. You can if you're comfortable in your level of risk. And that fits the point where you're not going to be out on the street tomorrow if you make one bad trade. If you can handle that, and that's something you can make peace with the fact that if you hold a trade overnight, theoretically the next day it could be worthless. That as a real possibility. Not to say that it's going to happen, right away, but the possibility that can happen, then go ahead and trade the market. And the analogy, and I know V loves this one, is I call it the mall on fire market looters mentality. And you go, well, what the hell does that mean? The mall on fire market looters mentality is, as a retail investor, you have to almost put yourself in the mindset of either a sovereign or a larger institution of banking. And once you can put yourself in that mindset, which is get what I can get while I can get it, and when I do get it, convert it into metals or other hard assets, then we say trade away. Use the market as a vehicle to convert paper into metals. That is as far as I can tell right now, statistically, algorithmically, that is probably the most advantageous or the most beneficial trading strategy that you can have. It's not, trade the market and then just reinvest. Don't you look at people's investment portfolios and they go, well, these are my short-term trades and these are my long-term holds. It's like, okay, well, let's sell all the long-term holds. That long-term hold, you should only be referencing metals when it comes to that, because that's an investment, or rather it is savings. That's how I look at it. That's insulation. It's the ultimate hedge. But there is that ability to trade the market if you're economically astute and you're able to monitor your portfolio. Absolutely. Go ahead and trade the market, but you have to look at it the same way that a lot of the sovereigns are and a lot of the institutions are, and a lot of the big investment companies, hedge funds included. And it really boils down to get what you can get while you can get it. And when you do, convert as much of it into hard assets, follow the BRICS nations lead, convert as much of it into hard assets or metals as you possibly can. And I know V had made reference to, I'd mentioned this before, was Dow 28,000. And when all that hyperinflation comes flooding back, I'm sure, as I've already illustrated, when that hyperinflation comes back, you're going to get that what's called a fool's rally. And that's going to be where people are tempted to sell off their metals for paper profits. Don't do that. That's a horrible idea. Hang on to it, because you want to be holding that stuff after the global currency implosion.
On the other side of it, right.
Exactly right, because that's what these guys are doing. They need to own the other side, and the people that are holding the metals, the precious metals, they're going to own the other side of the chaos, okay? Or they're going to own the result of the coming chaos, which really isn't chaos at all, because a lot of it's planned. It's when real chaos shows up that folks have to start worrying. But for the time being, 100% go ahead, trade the market. And to speak to V's, his analysis of gold and silver prices, I ran for a couple of different folks. They said, well, this was a commissioned report that somebody wanted very specific, where metals, there was a reference to the S&P and where metals prices are going to be. I said, okay. And to give you an idea how accurate it's been, like I said, last week, V and I both at the same time from different sources. I said Looking Glass called the bottom of the metals market. That was Thursday or Friday. I want to say Thursday. Today, silver sees biggest one-day gain in over a year. That was the bottom, folks. Going up from here, nowhere to go, because I do illustrate metals as one of the only, and I'm going to use a hacker term here for a second, one of the only exploits in modern economics available to the retail investors. You have to realize precious metals have to exist at an artificially repressed low. And then they can move to an artificially repressed high, which is still nowhere near their true value. But we'll let them get up a little higher. Let it get up a little higher in stages. Let it get up a little higher. Let it get up a little higher. And the reason that is because the folks that are trying to manipulate both the currency and the metals market simultaneously, they can't have those metals prices reflect their true value, because then it's obvious what's going on. So one of the only exploits the retail investor can do right now is, and V so eloquently puts it, it's like, who gives a rat's derriere as far as, it's going to be $20 today, $22 tomorrow, $26 that's irrelevant. That's stepping over pennies stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. That's insane. I ran Looking Glass and I said, right now, in today's dollars, And it's almost difficult to do, but sometimes you have to stop deciding what the value of gold is compared to dollars. But in today's dollars right now, this search date is about 7 days old. Okay, real value of gold is north of $10,000 an ounce. That's a real number. Real value of silver is about $1,100 an ounce. That's a real number. So those are post-implosion likely numbers, or by the time we see the height of a market where gold is compared to a fiat currency, that's the kind of value. The question we have to ask, and this is something I want to run Looking Glass on more, is there is that global mark-to-market or remark-to-market. I said there's not a lot of phrases in the world that can make most top-level bankers run for the bathroom holding their stomach and wishing they were wearing a pair of Depends, like the phrase mark-to-market. Okay? That's where, they say, well, assuming that there's an American bank that actually still owns their building free and clear, let's say hypothetically they decide, to start remark-to-marketing commercial real estate. We haven't seen that yet. That's going to be a fun day. But as assets begin to get remarked to either a regionalized world currency, whatever the case may be, where does the value of that gold and silver lie in reference to an entirely new form of currency, or an entirely new form of transactionary currency or trade settlement notes? And the object of the game is to just convert as much paper right now into as much gold as humanly possible. And like I said, just resist the temptation. I mean, don't get me wrong. V will tell you this. I'm a car guy. I'm a motorcycle guy. I love toys, man. I spend a lot of money on computer hardware. Some of it's for work, and some of it's just because I love neat gadgets. But the reality of the situation is, when you see that run up, don't be tempted to sell your metal. Don't do that. That's the last buying opportunity the smart money is going to have, is when everybody starts to offload, whatever physically delivered, by the way, key words there, that piece of paper that says you own gold, or that GLD ETF that says you own gold, or an ETN that says you own gold, you roll that up and smoke it. You don't own it. You might think you do. You don't. You own stock in an ETF in gold. It's just as worthless as any other stock, really, when you think about it. Physically good delivered gold and having it in your physical possession or vaulted someplace that is statistically less likely to experience any level of governmental chaos, so to speak. Those are all things that people can do to insulate themselves from something that's just not going to be stopped. And that's one of the things that V and I speak about, again, quite a bit. Is there's plenty of folks that come on and they jump up and down and they go, the sky's falling, oh my God, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Not entirely untrue. But what I like to do is I try to offer, from the information that Looking Glass reports, not only identify the problem, but also offer a couple of solutions. And those are some really important solutions there, is the internationalization. I'm very forward in saying that I personally am considering very strongly. I've been speaking to a few different people about it and listening to some webinars and stuff, and taking an active role is the expatriation thing. And some people say, well, that's very un-American. No, it isn't. I'm a realist, and I don't think people realize how bad it's going to get here. Imagine trying to – go ahead.
If we can we, we're up against a little late for the top of the hour break. If we can stop here and hit this on the other side, what you were about to get into, as it is very important, and they have new laws that they just passed on the, I forget the name of it, but the 31st of July, I believe, or the 1st of July, with these IRS laws, tax laws, and that's some stuff I want to get into on the other side. We're going to be right back, folks. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, October 6, 2014, with the Guerrilla Economist. His website is roguemoney.net, and he is joined by Michael Rosecliffe.
The ArcLight Institute.wordpress.com, folks. ARC is A-R-C, ArcLightInstitute.wordpress.com. Go ahead, Joe.
You can go to our website at hagmanandhagmann.com and find all their information there. With that, we're going to go to the top of the hour break. It'll be a little bit shorter. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the third and final hour of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with V, the Guerrilla Economist, and Michael Rosecliffe. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to V, and we ended up talking about the expatriation, and Michael was getting into that, but I'm going to give it back to V and let you start off this third hour.
No, thank you. The expatriation thing is very important. Here's the options you have, and I'll hand it back to Mike to fill this out as well. Here's your choice. Okay, you could a lot of us hear about economic collapses. Some of us think we could weather it if we stay in the same location where we're staying in, if you're near a large city. Some of us think that nothing bad will happen. But the reality is that it's a mathematical inevitability that there's going to be a massive collapse. When there's a collapse and breakdown of the economy, as well as service, as well as the thing that held everything together, which is the dollar, you're going to have chaos the likes to which you've never seen. Okay, Rosecliffe likes to use the word generation kill, and that's what he's detailing. This generation of kids who are completely strung out on psychotropic drugs, video games, lack of any sort of sanctity for life, so to speak. You take into account that type of violence. I mean, a whole bunch of Dylan Klebold from Columbine Unleashed just randomly killing for the heck of it. And I'm sure Rosecliffe will go into that a little later. Also, what I want to make mention of people is look at what's going to happen to some of the worst areas in the country, some of these deep inner city areas where people will be rioting for food. Okay, so you take into account the violence, you take into account the rioting, you take into account the disruption of services, you take into account that we are the #1 country in the world that has the most amount of medicated people on the planet. 70% of Americans are on some sort of medication. Take into account that we have the highest prison population in the world, and guess what? An economic collapse, you think they're going to keep those prisoners fed and closed? No. They're just going to open the prisons and let the prisoners out. Okay? You have open borders. You have a great balkanization of this country. What do you mean by balkanization? Well, take a trip down New York City. In a couple of blocks, you can go from Little Italy to Chinatown, and then you can swing up to the Bronx, and you see the Albanians on one side, you see the Hispanics on one side, you see the Italians on one side. You see everybody's balkanized. Okay. And then you get out to the Southwest, you got whole swaths of land, of areas where people just don't even speak English. You think they're going to come together and rally around the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? You're out of your mind. There's going to be violence on a scale that we've never seen. And some of the hard numbers that we've crunched earlier, you're looking at 25 million dead in the first 90 days. Okay? And this thing could last in a dilapidated, chaotic state for the next 2 years before some sort of semblance of normalcy returns. So the question is, do you want to be a part of that, or do you want to be able to get yourselves out? Look, let's just say you're some sort of crazy person, and you say to yourself, okay, you know what, I'm just going to move myself to a better location and weather it. Fine, you can do that. You can stock up on your cat food. You can find your bunker and stay there until the SWAT team comes for you, or you can go out to your country hideaway and whatnot and weather the storm with like-minded people. That's doable, okay? But you still have the question about your assets. So what are you going to do about your assets? You're going to keep millions of dollars of gold that's stashed in your sock drawer? I mean, come on. You're going to have to vault it at some point. And there are vaulting companies that I deal with that I know of that I can kind of point you in the right direction. You're going to have to internationalize yourself. You got to learn how to have your own international banking set up. You have to learn how to do all these things. And if you email me at guerrillaeconomist@gmail.com, I'll tell you exactly how to do it. So this is the issue you got to face. You have to learn how to internationalize yourself. You have to learn how to turn yourself into a bank.
V, if I can jump in here, let me ask you a question, okay? Because I get this a lot, usually after you're gone for like a day, okay, and people listen to the archive. I get like a bunch of questions for you from the archive. Let me ask you this: what about? What's wrong? What's wrong with? Let's say I decide here I am, Mr. America. Well, I guess not, Mr. American. And the patriotic kind of guy, and say, I'm staying here. I'm going to weather the storm. In fact, not only am I going to do that, I'm going to take all my gold, which could probably fit in on my finger, my wedding ring. Well, anyway, if I had a bunch of gold or silver or whatever, taking it and keeping physical possession of it, who in the world is going to take it away from me? In other words, why not stay here and weather the storm here, and keeping possession of your physical metals assets here. In other words, as opposed to internationalizing it, because wouldn't it be more dangerous to internationalize than it would be to stay put here in the United States, where at least we're on terra firma, familiar ground, or no? Is that the wrong way of thinking about it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. You know, a lot of people get confused on this, and I'll clear it right up. When I say internationalization, that doesn't mean, you see, you have to learn what I call off-the-grid finance. You have to learn how to survive outside of the banking system, free and clear of any sort of third-party counter risk. Okay, case in point, the way I have it set up for myself personally, I have an account with a few companies. One of the companies that I use is a company based in the Cayman Islands. I have an account with them. It's a gold fund. It's a gold and silver fund. Now, what they are part of what's called the Good Delivery System. And the Good Delivery System is a network of brokers, refiners, bullion banks, and private vaults. So meaning when I give this company a call and say, hey, you know what, could you put $100,000, I'd like to make a $100,000 purchase of gold. What they do is they go directly to the refiner. So there's no middleman. They're not going to Jimmy John's Coin and Carry. They're going directly to the refiner that is an LMBA certified refiner. That's the London Metals Bullion Market Exchange, okay, the LMBA. They're going to the LMBA certified refiner. And folks, the LMBA is a certification process, meaning this, whichever refiner is an LMBA refiner, there's thousands of refiners out there, but there's like less than 50 that are actually LMBA. That is the creme de la creme. That's the highest certification you could hold, and it's not something easy to get or achieve. Okay, it's very strict, very stringent. So they go to an LMBA refiner, and they say, okay, we need $100,000 worth of gold. So they will refine for them, for me, $100,000 worth of gold. And they'll take $100,000 worth of gold using a private securities company, and they'll count it upon pickup, and they'll take it to a private vault, like Viamat in Switzerland, okay, where some of my stuff is vaulted, okay? They'll go to Viamat, and upon delivery of Viamat, it's counted, and it's stored in a segregated account. The company that I deal with does unscheduled, on-site audits of the gold to make sure the gold is there. Everything is accounted for. There's serial numbers on every single one of those bars, and those serial numbers match up to what I have in my invoice. On top of that, because it's part of the Good Delivery System, and the Good Delivery System is what sovereigns use. In other words, nations. When nations buy gold, they buy LMBA gold in a Good Delivery System. So there's a lot of bullion banks who are buying gold all the time for what? For sovereigns. So let's just say I call my company up tomorrow and says, you know what, there's $100,000 worth of gold that's in my vault. I would like for you to liquidate $20,000 worth. All of a sudden the company will say, okay, all right, Mr. V, what currency would you like it in, and what bank account do you want us to send it to? That's power. And because it's outside of the banking network, all right, you're not exposed to any sort of third-party counter risk. On top of that, my gold is insured. It's secure against anything that would happen, even confiscation by, let's just say, there's a war breaks out and somehow somebody confiscates my gold. Like they take a tactical nuke to the vault door, crack it open, and then take the gold. It's even insured against that. That's how you really keep yourself safe and secure. And anytime I need it, here's the thing, man. You got to understand this. The nation, the country you're living in, is the most tyrannical country in the world. We are one of the most tyrannical. We slightly rank above Romania. Okay, that's how low on the totem pole we are. They've passed laws.
That's pretty sobering, by the way.
Yeah, and they've passed laws that, number one, they're going to confiscate your bank account. Number two, if you want to, renounce your U.S. citizenship, you're going to have to pay $2,300 a pop, or $2,600 a pop per citizen. Number three, they have these stupid FATCA laws that Joe was talking about before the break, where they want foreign nations who have American nationals there to start reporting on them for tax purposes. And if you internationalize yourself, in other words, you set up a foreign corporation. I mean, there's a company I deal with who I can refer out to you. They're a wonderful company. They're based out of Vancouver, British Columbia. They set up international business corporations in T8 tax zones. And a T8 tax zone is basically a country that does not report who the corporate owners are of that particular corporation. In other words, my corporation overseas, operates out of a specific island in the Caribbean. No one has any idea who has it, who owns it. They can search all they want, and all my hard assets, everything I own, is under that corporation. So you can do all the searches you want. You can have every law firm. You can have the freaking FBI go looking for my assets. They ain't going to find it. That's how covered you're going to be. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Have multiple passports. If somebody wants multiple passports, give me a call. I can get you a passport, but the prices on passports have gone up. You have to have multiple passports. See, in other words, you are somebody who's a global citizen. I know that has some connotations. What is he talking about? What I'm saying, global citizen, is your assets are in a tight, off the grid, wealth preserving system, and you yourself have multiple passports. You live in multiple locations. Your international holdings company, your international corporation that has that you own holds the house you live in, the cars you drive, the gold and silver you have. All of it is owned by my international corporation. You look me up. I own jack squat. I own nothing in this country. Absolutely nothing. And I refuse to, because it's a tyrannical nation. Okay, there's an old biblical proverb that we always say. A wise man sees the destruction and he gets out of the way. The problem we have today in America, there's a lot of wise men. They're seeing a lot of things, and they're doing jack diddly squat about it. Think about that for a second.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the question becomes, to a lot of people who see the destruction coming, what's stopping you? What's holding you back? I know the dangers of it. I'm getting out of here, folks. I will be gone. I will not be here. I'm out. I've made up my mind. I'm leaving. I've ran 2 webinars already on Plan B Panama, which that's already set up. Anybody wants to expat to Panama, you let me know. I have a team in Panama there. We're going to having a seminar November 15th to the 16th. I will be one of the speakers. There's a team out in Panama that's already set up, and I can give you a million reasons why Panama is better than the United States. Today, one of my partners down in Chile, in southern Chile, we've secured the rights. They inked the deal already for the plot of land in southern Chile. So it's only a matter of time before that gets built out. That was an escrow for a while. Deal's been signed. That's going to be built up very quick. So the investor package are going to be done for that very soon. So here's options. I'm not going to be one of those people that are just telling you, oh yeah, all this crap is happening. But there's options. You got to be smart. If you need help with the stuff, reach out to me. You're sitting on, there are even clients I know of that have a tremendous amount of metal sitting in their home, and I'm like, okay, look, it's time for you to start moving that stuff. I make a simple phone call to one of my colleagues in Manhattan, and I have her give you a call, and they will literally come to your doorstep, armed to the teeth, and pick up your stuff, safe and secure, counted and delivered anywhere you want. Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, wherever. Cayman Islands just opened up a new vault. Panama's building a couple of T3 vaults. You got to internationalize yourself. This is a country that's going broke, that has signed laws to rob you blind and to subjugate you. I mean, are you nuts? And you want to sit there and wave your flag and say the land of the... Look, the concept of the country that you grew up in, it's dead. Get over it. Get over it. I'm sure, back in the 80s, one of my favorite movies was Weekend at Bernie's. Some of y'all seen that. Here's a dead guy. Everybody's at his beach house having fun. Oh, Bernie, hey, what's up? Bernie's dead. That's kind of like us Americans. We're like at Weekend at Bernie's. We're all having this party. There's a dead guy here, but most people ain't getting over the fact that the guy's dead. Your country's dead. It doesn't exist. Your borders have collapsed. There's 300,000 illegals coming over that border every month. You've been signed into a North American Union. That's why the Congress has no power. The executive branch of government has grown exponentially, and they're able to do things without congressional approval because that's been signed away. That's a dirty little secret they haven't told you. In the beginning of the show, Joe mentioned about the Emergency Banking Act, 1933, the U.S. bankruptcy. Your country's dead. It doesn't exist anymore. It's run by fascists. It's run by neo-satanic fascists. And all they know how to do is war and kill, and they're done. Okay, the world is sick of them. And the world is going to get rid of these guys and expose them for who you are. But in the process, you are going to be collateral damage. So those of you with kids, listen carefully to what I'm saying. Do you want to wake up in a world where there's an economic collapse, you don't have any information? You don't know what's out there. You don't know what you're facing. Do you want that kind of stress on your family? No. I sure wouldn't. Or would you like to sit on a cafe, or like me and Rosecliffe, like we'll joke around, sit on a beach, sipping a Mai Tai, picking lint from our belly button, and with our laptops and finding out what the heck's going on in the U.S.?
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, but what about the people who are the average? Well, not even the average. I mean, you pick somebody like Joe and I, for example.
Get to the countryside.
Okay. All right.
Get to the countryside. That's what you want to do. If you guys remember George Washington's dream, his vision that he had vision. The first war he had that he talked about was he saw a conflict between America and Britain, which happened. Okay, the Revolutionary War. The second war was brother versus brother. That was the Civil War. And he said the final great conflict, he saw large cities burning everywhere. But then he said that there are people on the countryside who came out and they were able to revitalize the land. Get to the country. Get to somewhere that's outside of a major population center. Because
right.
I promise you, when this whole thing goes down, the last thing the government's going to do is start looking for you out there because they're going to be too broke and insolvent to do anything.
Right. And certainly you want to get out of the way of the crossfire. So for us people who cannot or choose not to, and there's a distinction there, choose not to leave the country, then at least get yourself and your family out of harm's way if you can, when you can, as soon as you can. And I get that. I understand that. Mike, you've been pretty quiet. Of course, Joe passed me a note here, and I apologize, V. I want to apologize to you. You've got a radio show every Sunday night. Joe asked me to. He wrote a note that said you better ask him to plug his radio show. So let me give you that opportunity before I pass it over to Mr. Rosecliffe.
Sure. We got the Guerrilla Economist radio show that's Sunday nights from 6 o'clock to 8 p.m., 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Sunday on freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio. You can check me out. I'm on Studio A. So far, it's been very, very, very successful. I have some really good guests on. We cover a lot of the gambit between economics and geopolitics, and so that's the radio show. Now, one of these days, I'm going to get Doug Hagmann on there.
I'm sorry, that you cut out the last sec.
I said one of these days, Doug Hagmann's going to be on there.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Rosecliffe, we've dominated. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I mean, V will tell you this, and anybody whose show I've been on will tell you this. This is the longest I've stayed quiet, I believe, in the history of my very short radio career thus far. But there's not too many guys that can keep up. But I guess V and I both being from New York and almost being cut from the same piece of steel a little bit. It's we call it the intellectual minigun complex, and that's where it's just, goes fire as fast as you can, as much as you can, and then kind of let the barrel cool down a little bit. But one thing I will say is rewinding all the way back to what V had said about urban centers in the United States turning into a fair representation of the Moog a la Black Hawk Down. Okay, that's a real statistical possibility. Those that subscribe to the EAM, I was inspired by a very nice lady named Diane, who I promise I'd only use her first name on the show. She posted on my site a couple of times, but Diane's fantastic, and she goes, I'm from Detroit. Am I safe where I'm at? And I was like, obviously you don't pay attention to the fact that every time I kind of use some dry sarcastic humor, I usually reference Detroit as already looking like something of a sociological experiment going on. But the reality of the situation is we've actually, if you're familiar with the Richter scale or the Fujitsu scale, that's associated with earthquakes, seismic events, and tornadoes. There is no scale right now to measure or quantify and or predict what an urban center might look like in the event of complete chaos. And when I say complete, there's a couple of pieces on thearclightinstitute.com. You don't have to put the WordPress after it. We got the domain. It's thearclightinstitute.com. That kind of outlines, well, first of all, we haven't seen any real large-scale civil unrest in the United States without the assumption or without the knowledge that law and order will be restored. Okay, this is from a guy that at the time when Hurricane Sandy hit on Long Island. I lived through that and saw kind of bits and pieces that to me, especially given what I was working on, represented kind of a sociological case study. But nonetheless, there has never really been, even if you go as far back as the Watts riots, the L.A. riots, like stuff like that, even as far back into the 1800s of some of the Union incidents, there has never been civil unrest in the United States, with the possible exception of, the Civil War, and even then not so much. It wouldn't be an accurate parallel, but can anybody throughout American history pick one incident where it was just chaos without the assumption of at some point in a short period of time there'll be a restoration of law and order? And the answer to that question is there really hasn't been. Maybe the War of 1812 in some capacity is a better representation of what that might look like statistically. But in terms of going back to the Fujitsu scale and the Richter scale, and hell, even nuclear weapons have sunshine units at this point, which I always thought was kind of a cute and festive name. There's no real predictive scale or quantifiable damage scale associated with civil unrest. We've taken the liberty here at the ArcLight Institute to actually create a D scale. It's kind of a pet name around the office at the moment. We haven't come up with anything really more kind of catchy than that. But what it's going to do, it's going to be able to lay it over the top of a city and, kind of go, okay, what might a city look like based upon a given set of metrics? And that scale just doesn't exist right now. We felt it important enough with the amount of questions we've gotten and, to actually go ahead and pretty much create an entire new system to help people survive if they're caught in the middle of an urban center when all hell breaks loose, because I don't think people are ready for that kind of chaos that's going to come. And like I said, V had made reference to it, and I call it Generation Kill. Right? And that is I'm 33 years old. Okay, I'll be 34 this July. I'm a video gamer. Okay, I have not always been a sober angel of sorts throughout my entire life. All right, as a matter of fact, I'm waiting on a bottle of Smirnoff to come home with my esteemed assistant. But raised as a member of a generation known for psychotropic drugs, and a steady stream of video games and violence, most of the members of my generation were able to kind of separate that. And I don't really necessarily see the 30-somethings as Generation Kill. There are exceptions. You start to get younger. I'm talking like 15 to about, let's say late 20s at this point. You're looking at a certain desensitization to violence. I'm not blaming video games. I play way more than I probably should. But I'm not. And it's a constant barrage of a desensitization to violence. I don't blame the media even so much for that, but it's definitely a component in a grander scheme of a paradigm mentality shift in the United States that you got to keep in mind. And I always kind of smirk when I see this because I look at things arbitrarily, and it's something that can be at times difficult to do. But you look at kids in the Middle East, right? And they show, of course, the anti-Muslim nonsense that goes on Twitter. They show the kid with the AK-47. Hey, at least that kid's going to go die for something that he believes in that is greater than himself. You got to remember, in America, people shoot each other over friggin' sneakers and jackets, if you remember that in the 80s. So the absolute snap reaction to violence at times in the United States, and that's, again, we have to go a lot on statistical modeling because, quite honestly, we've never seen that before, for the most part. So there's a lot of guesswork that goes on there, or I shouldn't say guesswork, but there's a lot of statistics to wade through, so to speak. But as far as like the scale that we're kind of working on now, where we're going to release the beginnings of it the next EAM. You mentioned the balkanization of neighborhoods. Lest we remember what Koreatown looked like during the LA riots. That's real. You're going to talk about an instantaneous stratifications along semi-predictable lines, and as small as a neighborhood or as large as an entire city region, including suburbs. So that's something that we're legitimately concerned about. And I'll be honest with you, I'm originally from Long Island. I spent a lot of time in the city. Guess who's not in New York anymore? For obvious reasons. This is not stuff that I just sit around and I go, hey, it'd be fun to go on the radio. I had no intentions of doing this. I had no intention to go in public. I left New York, I'll be honest with you, with 2 computers under my arm. okay, and 2 tubs of hardware. That was the looking glass system. That's how I got started. Okay, I've been working on it for 10 years, and it was there were personal issues there that we won't get into. But let's say a few people knew what I had, and apparently they wanted it, and they didn't get it. But that's how powerful the system is, and that's kind of my story. I don't like to really particularly care to talk about myself, but you know, I'm pretty much out in the middle of nowhere right now, and it's apart from the air being a lot cleaner than was in New York. I'm loving it out here. I always thought I'd miss New York, and I don't. You know, so there is no shame in the expatriation thing. There is no shame in getting out of the way of danger, because otherwise there is a very good chance you will be a statistic for no apparent reason, other than being in the wrong place at the wrong time when all hell breaks loose. So to that end, I guess I'm just going to, in a roundabout way, kind of agree with V and say that, yeah, you know, look into that overseas vaulting, look into overseas residence. I listened in on his there was a seminar about Panama. And apart from the bonus being that my wardrobe would come back into fashion, I love Hawaiian shirts, by the way. I love them because they irritate other people. So the louder and the more obnoxious the Hawaiian shirts that I can wear are, the happier I am. So I guess moving down there would be a double bonus. I'm not going to get killed in some massive multi-agenda, you know, quasi-stew revolution that will be the United States inevitably, because you have to remember, during the Civil War, during the War of 1812, during the Revolution, there were only 2 sides. You got to think how many different ethnic groups and how many different variables exist now in the primordial soup that is the United States. So that's bonus number 1. Bonus number 2 is that my khakis and my Converse and my Hawaiian shirts will spontaneously be back in fashion. So that's kind of a bonus too.
Mike, let me ask you a question, and V, you can weigh in this as well. You know, you've when you first came on. By the way, I pulled up your this past weekend. I pulled up your first interview on our show, and you talked about Japan being the contagion, and it's back in the news again. But that aside, let me ask you a question. We're talking about some dire things here. How your timetable on this? And I know you had mentioned by the end of 2016. I'm not looking for an exact timetable here, but I mean, what's your gut telling you guys?
V, I'm going to jump in front of you for the first time this show, and I'm going to give a hard answer. And you guys know I like to give real roundabout answers. 24 months. Go ahead, V.
Yeah, you know, the scary thing is this. If you guys remember my whole thing that I got the information from the 4-star general source, and 2017 being the complete undermining of the United States.
Yep.
If you remember that, then couple that with my City of London sources. I've had that for a while, and then all of a sudden here comes Rosecliffe, runs Looking Glass, and puts it smack dab in this pretty much the same ballpark. You know, it's 24 months. You want to get the heck out of here. You want to be out of here by 2016, the latest. Beginning like first quarter 2016 fiscally. You know, you don't want to be here. I've accelerated my plans to exit stage right. I don't want to be here. I really don't, and I'm serious about that. I'm not going to be here. That's the biggest thing. That is my main focus right now. So all the numbers are this. I mean, guys, when I first came on January the 11th. We've only had maybe a handful of triggers globally. We've had the Eurozone crisis and we had Japan. Those are still in play. But now when you look at the world globally, there are multiple triggers. And, you know, what was the terminology we've heard today, Mike? We heard when the black swans flock at you or something?
Yeah, you know, I've said before, I said one black swan by itself is dangerous. You put about 3 of them together, and if you've ever been down by a pond watching a kid feed geese before, watch what happens when you tick off a swan. That's kind of the humorous image that I put in people's heads, because I've always kind of smirked and said, wow, you know, swans are used at weddings and stuff like that, and as a symbol of peace and hope and so forth. It's like, do you ever see an angry swan? You know, it's about the most terrifying thing you can see at the local park. So, you know, to that aspect, yeah, you know, when the black swans start to flock together, and you start getting more of these anomalous events in the same place at the same time, mathematically speaking, it's time to really start looking around and realize that you're not dealing with coincidental events. You're dealing with something far more significant. Right,
absolutely. And that's the thing here, folks. It's like, you know, we only had like one trigger, 2 triggers, 3 triggers. Now you have multiple triggers, multiple events, multiple black swans, too many variables. The variables are so rate right now that for me to even keep track of all of them, it's mentally fatiguing. And you have to come to the conclusion that, hey, you know what? You have to do something. Either you get out to the countryside or you just get the heck out. And I've chosen, because, I have a family, I want to get out. And that time frame, Doug, is what we're looking at, barring any unforeseen events. But that's where we're heading at. I mean, that has to do with a lot of things, not only my general source, but also the completion of the New Silk Road, the undermining of the U.S. dollar. All these things are happening. I mean, danger. I mean, I'm just waiting for the robot from Lost in Space to become, barging into my office saying, "Danger, Will Robinson, danger." I mean, that's the alarm bells that are going on in my mind every single day. I mean, look, now you have this whole Shinola scare that's going rampant throughout the country, and yeah, it is a serious infectious disease. And I mean, folks, they're going to throw out some sort of mandatory vaccination program. They're testing the waters on. This is what the biggest thing that's going to come out as a bull thing is this. Number one, travel controls. Okay, travel controls, travel restrictions, and capital controls.
That's
Those
exactly
are two things.
That's exactly what Roberta from Council Bluffs, Iowa, has written in on our studio contact page, wanting me to ask you: is it not the goal here, regardless of what the trigger mechanism is, in this case, for example, Ebola, is it not the goal, for example, to initiate global travel restrictions, domestic travel restrictions? Yeah.
Especially for America. You see, everybody's trying to get the heck out of here. Look, a month and a half, 2 months ago, the European countries have already initiated travel bans to West African nations, simply on the whole premise of Ebola. This nation hasn't. But you're going to see travel restrictions, not on Africans from coming in here, but from you leaving out. It's going to be one side. That's why, what do you think you have that idiot from the CDC saying, "Oh, we can't have travel restrictions here and stop the travel from Africa to here"? That will make things worse. No, what they're going to do is the exact inverse. They're going to prevent you, Mr. and Mrs. American, from traveling, and they're going to say, "See how good it is that we're protecting you from traveling. Oh, how noble. Oh, how wonderful. Oh, how loving." And that's the whole thing here, folks. Travel restrictions and capital controls. That's the name of the game with this whole entire Shinola playbook.
Okay.
That's what's going on here.
Now I've got a question for Mike. This is directed at Mike, and I apologize for the lightning round session here, but got so many people, so many questions. I'm sorry. This is from Mike out of Portland, listening live. Thank you, Mike. Wanting to know, does your system, your software, your analysis project anything about the elections, upcoming presidential elections here in the United States?
All right. Okay, I guess I have to give the real answer on that one. And the short answer is there very well may not be one. Okay? There is a statistical chance. I'm not going to name the number just yet because I haven't refined the data to the point where I feel confident enough in saying something. And that's something I want people to understand, is that I do do multiple refinement searches. This isn't just like hitting enter and lo and behold, there it is. There's real work that goes into these searches. But statistically, I won't name specific numbers, but there is a very real chance. And the reason I say that is right now, population sentiment in terms of the voter base that's out there, in terms of the population of the United States, in terms of sentiment on about 15 or 20 key metrics that I have been very thankful to get some fantastic data, given how old the data is, from the 30s, the 1930s, okay? The 1930s, there is only one place you can take these metrics on, if you can imagine an overhead projector transparency, lay it over other data and see an almost identical match, and that is Germany, 1936. There is, I will tell you this, you want to talk about a scare factor of about 11, if I can quote the movie This Is Spinal Tap. As you can tell, V and I both go up to 11, just like the amplifiers. But, okay, there's a lot of political cartoonery that goes on the Internet that indicates that Obama is just like Hitler. Obama's got the Gestapo. He's just like Hitler. Obama's going to be the Hitler leader of the United States. Is it my imagination, or do people have the memory of an F''N goldfish to realize that it was guys like Hitler and Goebbels, okay, that formed the SA party that threw Marxists and Leninists like Hitler out in favor of a strong individual, a strong nation, a strong industry, and to some degree, individual self-sustainment and not a nanny and welfare state. Quite the opposite of everything that you see coming out of the Obama administration. Statistically, hypothetically speaking, let's say Michael was an enterprising dictator, okay? I could take over this country in 15 minutes. That's scary. How the hell could he possibly say that? Because I could do it. The SA party in Germany, 1936, okay? We have that in the United States right now.
Well, in what context?
The Tea Party. And that's not a comparison in racial, religious, or otherwise ideals. I'm talking about just individual sentiment, opposition to an administration or a mentality of an administration. So please do not take that out of context. Whoever can figure out, I can tell you how to do it in about 15 minutes. Whoever can figure out how to take the Occupy Wall Street movement, which has been hijacked and lampooned for the most part by the mainstream media, okay, because of lack of leadership, and the Tea Party. And if you can take the barricades out from between the two of them, and you can go, hey, Tea Party folks, remember back in the 60s when 3/4 of you were probably smoking a doob? Yeah, remember when you were hippies and revolutionaries and you were pissed off at the government? Hey, see those guys over there? Those are your kids. They're in the same situation except made exponentially worse by a number of different things, not the least of which is speed of information and globalization. Whoever can figure out how to unify those two messages so that an Occupy movement has the finances of a Tea Party movement, which are largely older, more established folks, whoever can take those two movements and put them together, give me 15 minutes and a cup of coffee, I'll give you a coup.
You're talking about anarchy, though, right?
Essentially. Well, that was something that did precede, Hitler's rise to power in 1936. And you look at the metrics, we're there. As a nation, we're there. You look at the Tea Party movement, and that's another movement that's been largely hijacked by our, I say this sarcastically, our good friends at the mainstream media. You get those two parties together, and all of a sudden, you realize that all the Occupy movement is a, it's a Tea Party group with slightly crappier fashion, worse music, and slightly better drugs at the moment than the Tea Party movement. They're mad at the same people. They're angry at the same people. You don't think that Occupy movement is full of people that voted for Obama once to prove that we can be, make history and, elect the first black president? The second time they voted him in was just to prove how stupid Americans are. But you take those two individual groups and you point them in the same direction, and they realize they're mad at the same groups. They're angry and they're disposed and they're disappointed. I mean, I think you have an entire generation of Obama voters that thought they were electing the next Kennedy. Surprise.
Yeah.
That went over like a fart in a hurricane, didn't it?
Yeah, interesting comparison between Kennedy and this one now. Let me ask V, do you agree with what Michael was saying?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, when you look at the data itself, we're at a very volatile point. There is a situation here that if something were to happen to the current golfer in chief, like for instance, if he goes out and plays his 180th round of golf and he swings the club too hard, it comes around and whacks him in the head, and he's out cold. That's it. And at the same time, Biden's trying to rush to him, crashes the golf cart into a pole and goes right through the miniature windshield on the golf cart, ends his life. There's total anarchy, and at that point, I mean, there's a chance that you could have, in the midst of an economic chaos, in the midst of a collapse, okay, an individual, a strong man, to rise up. That potential does exist, and I'm not trying to link it to anything. I'm not saying it's part of any agenda, but just looking at the raw data that Mike, ran, as well as from my sources, that potential. And I called up my guys and say, hey guys, here's the deal. Do you think there's a chance that there could be a strong man take control of the United States? And the answer is absolutely. Because when you look at every single nation that went far left, outside of left-wing wackadoo nonsense, they're all reverting back to a strong right-wing paradigm. Germany is going right. France is going right. The United States will go right. That potential does exist. How would that play into the entire chaos? How would that play into the breakdown of things? Who knows? Okay, but the point is, like, you know, these are there's going to be multiple layers of challenge that people will have to face in the new post-collapse United States. First of all, the United States as we know it will cease to exist. So whatever balkanized group of regions exist, that's what, you know, people have to, you know, deal with, and that potential for a strong man or one or two strong men or like some sort of mob family type balkanization, that could very well happen, Doug.
All right. Do we hit the proper nails with the proper velocity? I guess that's one question I have before. I mean, my goodness, I can't believe we're 8 minutes toward the end of the show, but that's one concern I have if we actually hit the high points here, and that what we need to hit. But one question I've got to ask on behalf of Gene out of Macon, Georgia, asking if the IMF, for example, would be bailing us, or at the end of the game at some point with the IMF. No?
IMF is going away.
Right.
IMF is going to be absorbed.
Okay.
With what money would be my question.
Well,
yeah,
that's very true. And to follow that up, is the second part of his question is, will on the other side of this, the currency that'll emerge, are you looking at a digital global currency, or are you looking at something different?
Well, the initial one's going to be a gold-backed trade settlement note. So what Mike's incredible research has shown with Forex is that every single currency is diving to parity. So with this you know, currency war that launched off in 2008 and was accelerated in 2013 till now, all the currencies are in the race to the bottom. But while they're going to the race to the bottom, what's strangely been happening, as Mike detailed with Looking Glass, is that we're seeing a parity with the currencies. So you can have multiple currencies. See, if they try to do one currency for everybody, it's not going to work. There's too many factors. But if they have everybody has their own currency, but you settle the trade. Remember that analogy I gave between washing machines and soap. You can have all the washing machines you want, so long as I control the soap. In other words, I control the very things that make the mechanisms function. Okay, so you can have all the currencies you want, but if I can control the trade settlement, hey, we're in. Why do you think the City of London right now, the mayor, the Lord Mayor of the City of London, is meeting with Chinese officials? Why do you think the City of London is intimately involved with the New Silk Road, with the Eurasian trade zone? Why are they blessed with the whole entire RMB yuan swap system? Why are they allowing yuan bonds to be sold in the City of London? Why are they doing all this? Because they're going to control the mechanisms. It's the whole soap and washing machine analogy.
Understood. All right. V, and then I'll turn it back to Mike. Go ahead, Joe.
I do have one question for V. A listener wanted to know what was the carrot bar that you mentioned earlier in the show.
Oh, okay. Carrot Ball is a fantastic program. I'm in it. It's a wonderful business opportunity. It's a great way for people to start a savings program where you can buy a gram of gold a week, a gram of gold every 2 weeks, a gram of gold a month, whatever you can afford. And you know, they give you LMBA certified, kind bar, good delivery gold from a good delivery refiner directly to your house. It's a fantastic program. If you have any questions on it, you can contact me, Guerrilla Economist at gmail.com, and I'll show you how you can get involved with carrot bars.
All right, and folks, let me remind you, Hagmann at Hagmann.com, the links to roguemoney.net, and soon Michael's website, ArcLight Institute, the ArcLight Institute.com will be up there. I apologize. Let me just make sure I did that right. That's right, the ArcLight Institute.com.
And also,
go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, and one last thing, Doug. Anybody who wants to expat themselves, again, Panama's already set up. Go to planbpanama.info. Planbpanama.info. The seminar is going to be there. You can register for the seminar. We're limiting the first seminar to about 25 seats. So this way everybody gets individualized attention. You can see the speakers. You can see the team. Go ahead and register. Take a look.
All right, very good. Mike, sorry about that. Mike, last words before we wrap it up.
Well, the one thing I would like to add real quick is the possibility of and this is a subject for a whole other show, I suppose, but cryptocurrencies backed by metals, things like bitcoins and stuff. Again, a lot of research going into that, so that's something I think that's on the other side of exactly what V said, which is a short-term, a trade settlement note of some sort or a currency note of some sort that's metals backed. It's the way it's got to be. But to that end, yep, the ArclightInstitute.com. We do offer commission searches. If anybody has anything specific, I've already had one gentleman sign up, two of them actually, for full-on portfolio research to run Looking Glass on. It is not an inexpensive service. I say that not to frighten people away, but given the amount of research it has to go in, especially when dealing with hyper-specific topics. But we've delivered a few reports already now specific to people's individual situations in their portfolios and such, and everyone's been really, really happy with the results. V has sent me somebody who I'm getting ready to do a full-on, commission search. Again, it's not inexpensive, but if folks are interested, they want to, they want to inquire about that, I'll certainly speak to them. I am not greedy. I'm not, but I also did put thousands of hours of work into this, so it's one of those rare examples of where free market capitalism really works. So to that end, that's something I wanted to offer everybody. If you have a sudden, massive outpouring of emails that you get to the show that ask the same question over and over again, I would be willing to run that too and report the results back if it's something that your listeners are really interested in. And I'd also like to say I had a fantastic time on the show, and thank you sincerely for having me on. And I'm excited to be on with V because we always say it's a drag race to see who can talk the fastest.
Well, one final closing question. And this is a young lady who I know sent an email in asking, hey, V, how long have you known Mike and where you been keeping him? So I'll let you answer that question.
I met Mike through a mutual friend named Dale Pinkert, who was a phenomenal Forex trader who used to work at the CME. And Dale introduced me to Mike maybe about, 2 weeks ago, something like that. We just hit it off, man. 3 weeks.
Our
We're like birds of a
was
feather.
4 hours long.
Wow.
4-hour conversation, and it was just, I was like, where are you from, man? He was like, New York. And I was like, yeah, I figured as much. And both of us are going on hyperdrive, and, no one's complaining, hey, slow down. So it was a match made in heaven.
Wow, man, fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. We are at the close of our program. I want to thank you very much for your time. I do believe, based on the audience participation, I believe that the audience has really learned quite a bit. Mr. Rosecliffe, thank you so much for your time. V, again, thank you. God bless. And
Doug, it's a pleasure. We'll do it again.
All right, buddy.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. That was V, the Guerrilla Economist, RogueMoney.net, and also Mr. Michael Rosecliffe. You can visit him at thearclightinstitute.com, both linked off Hagmann and Hagmann.com. Until next time, till tomorrow. Tomorrow night, Stan Deyo. We've got him scheduled for tomorrow night, and of course,
Wednesday,
Paul McGuire on.
We will be on Pastor Paul Begley's show, and from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern time, and then he will be on our show in the evening. Thursday, Paul McGuire. Friday, Josh Tolley.
That's correct, and I'm looking forward to all the shows coming up this week, folks. Have a great night. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for giving us time tonight to spend with you. Remember, you're never alone, and we're with you, and we're praying for you, and we're here with you. And all we want to do is bring the truth to you. God bless. Stay safe until tomorrow. Good night.